Hello, Internet. My name is Ryan Ingram, and we are live. This is tons of fun. I experimented with the setup a little bit to where you're not on my desk. So when I touch my desk, then you can't see the screen wobble. So you might see me looking down a lot to answer some questions, but hopefully that is a-okay. So this is a question and answer. So whatever questions that you have that you want answered by me at the moment, please go ahead and put those down into the comments and we will get started. So I was asked one question. Let's see here. I've got it pulled up on my phone by Miss Antoine. And she said, question for Friday. Business bank accounts. Do you set one up for each house or one for all of them? Or do you set it based upon the bank you have a mortgage with? What about from a liability point of view? What's the best way to set that up? So for bank accounts, we have a lot of them. So we follow Profit First. I thought I had that book on the shelf. It's called Profit First by Mike Michalowicz. So if you haven't read that book, I would highly recommend that you do so. It really talks about how to go about setting up your bank accounts to make sure that you pay yourself first. Always have a decent amount of money set aside for taxes, which is super important. So that's how we follow it. So for each of our LLCs, we have, I think, about 5 or 6 actual bank accounts, and we keep different books for each LLC. Now, we do not have a bank account for each property. So the way that we've structured it, that our CPA has advised us for, and also our attorney really likes what our CPA suggested, is we have 10 properties in each LLC. So each time we acquire a new set of 10 properties, we create a new LLC. And then we just put properties in that LLC until it's full, and full means 10. Now that's an arbitrary number. It's really personal preference. I know some people that have a different LLC for each property that they own. And I know some people that have a large number of properties and they're all in the same LLC. It really comes down to personal preference, what exactly you are attempting to accomplish, because Ms. Antoine has a great point in that each time you set up a new LLC, you do need to keep separate books. So if you have a LLC for each individual property that you own, you are going to have a lot of bank accounts. And from a liability perspective, you should have insurance on your property. And on each of your property's insurance policy should also have liability coverage or general liability. And if you carry enough amount of insurance, then you kind of should be good. And then if you kind of layer on top of the property insurance, maybe a general liability policy for your actual LLC, and then an umbrella on top of that, you should have a lot of layers of liability that should have to be exhausted before you personally take any sort of, oh, there you are. Thanks for listening. Before you have any sort of risk about like that veil being pierced and then being able to have access to your personal assets. So there is that question. Are there any more? And let me also go ahead and put this disclaimer out there, because that is not legal advice. I am an insurance agent, but that is not just a blanket overall true insurance statement. You definitely need to consult with the individual that knows your specific situation. So a lot of these questions honestly really scare me, because I'm hardly somebody that you should listen to. I am no attorney. I am no CPA, but that's how we do it. Profit First, Mike Michalowicz. I think that's an awesome book. A lot of business owners make this horrible mistake in which they do not pay themselves ever. So while you start businesses with the hopes that it will support you financially, a lot of business owners see that there's a direct correlation with how successful your company is versus how much money you pull out of it. So the more money you pull out of it, the more you're kind of choking the business and keeping it from growing. So a lot of business owners just put the money right back into the business and get caught up in this reinvestment cycle, because at some point it's going to pay off. But when do you actually start taking money from the business? That's what a lot of business owners struggled with. And I think Mike Michalowicz did an awesome job at laying things out in a really easily understandable format that is really encouraging and should be encouraging to the majority of business owners. So let's see, comments. Thanks. I appreciate that. No more comments yet. So let's see. In the meantime, I guess I can talk about another question that I received that I was a huge fan of. I had every intention of making a standalone video about this, but I haven't yet done so. We did have appraisals done this past week. So we went around to 36 of our properties, and I escorted an appraiser throughout those for an exterior and interior inspection, and I am thrilled. The residents that live in these properties are phenomenal humans. So when my wife and I first got started, it was really important for us that we only buy properties that we were comfortable living in ourselves. And after walking through 36 of these, not only would I live in the area where that house is, I would also live, I don't know how to say this, I would live with the resident just because of how clean they keep the properties. A lot of these properties were immaculate, super impressive. I'm really proud to own a lot of these properties, which I think is completely contrary to what a lot of people hear, because especially when you're talking about the properties that have lower values, then a lot of people assume that people live in the properties that they don't want to talk to, and people assume that the quality of living is a lot lower. And from what I have experienced, from what I have seen so far, that couldn't be further from the truth. But I guess it makes sense. All of just the stigmas, stereotypes, whatever you want to call it, associated with the lower property value properties. I could see how people arrive there, but very seldom is it true. Very seldom. But that's not the question that I wanted to talk about. So this comment, I can't pull it up on here, but it does say, let me ask, is it nerve-wracking when you borrow private money to buy real estate? It just terrifies me to the core to do that. How did you get over it to do it on bigger deals? I think this is a phenomenal question. I'm a huge fan of it. And it really did take me a while to get over, I guess, the fear of borrowing money. So when I first started, I was a huge fan of Dave Ramsey. Back in 2014, I think is when I learned of him, and I paid off all of my personal debt. And I made this vow to myself to never get into any debt at all again. So whenever I moved up here to Ohio, we bought our first property in cash. It was a duplex. I've got a video on that I definitely think you should check out. But we bought that property for $35,000 of cash, and I was convinced that I was going to build a real estate portfolio without utilizing debt whatsoever. But after 3 or 4 months of owning that property, the cash flow on that was just so small compared to what I would normally expect to get out of a $35,000 investment. So I realized that with all of the expenses, at the time, I was also using a property management company that was just absolutely nickeling and diming me to death. So at one point, I actually paid them $45 to deliver a notice of entry. And it wasn't even like a 3-day notice of eviction. It wasn't even like an inspection. It was something that they had agreed to. So it didn't need to be legally sent and posted. Truly. Just a phone call would have sufficed, but they charged me a $45 trip fee. So with things like that, we just weren't making any money. So I think on average, even though the property was rented out for a gross rental value of about $1,000, I was only making $140 a month from a $35,000 investment. So I thought to myself, this is going to take me forever if I try to build a real estate portfolio, because $140 a month, and how many months I would have to do that in order to have enough to buy a second property was just overwhelming. So we actually went to the bank and we bought a second property for $28,000. We had a down payment of $7,000. So now our cash investment is $7,000, and that property rented out for $770 per month. So this was a perfectly livable home. We were really happy to own it. And the cash flow on that was tremendous compared to the one where we just outlaid $35,000 and we're making like 140. Now the neighborhoods were slightly different. Obviously, the duplex was rented out for like $450, $500 a month, whereas this is a single family home that's rented out for $770. But nonetheless, just after doing tons of soul searching, the truth of the matter is we put $7,000 down, and even after the management fees and whatnot, we were making about $500 per month. Now, the mortgage payment on that one is a solid $112 per month. So if my cost of financing is $112, but the gross rental income is $770, well, how many times am I willing to do that before I am not willing to do it anymore? And I just think that that's something that you should repeat as often and as much as possible. So that was the first kind of realization that I had, where I said, you know what, most debt truly is bad. But if it is debt on a property, the property is not going to go anywhere. If it burns down, it's covered by insurance. So it would be replaced by the insurance policy, or you would get enough cash out to pay off the loan and probably even pocket some as well. And if the tenant destroys it, then yes, that affects the cash flow, but you should have reserves to cover that. So in the meantime, it's going to bring in money on a monthly basis. So if the threat of, I guess, loss is gone from the insurance side of things, it's not going to disappear, similar to like what the stock market would do. I would never borrow money to buy stocks, but houses don't disappear often. And if they burn down, or if some other sort of covered loss on the insurance side happens, then you're probably going to profit a little bit. And when you profit from insurance, generally it's a tax-free thing. But again, that disclaimer, I'm not a professional. So that really made me optimistic on borrowing cash. And then our first loan that we took out from a friend was in February of 2019, so probably about 6 or 7 months, and we were able to pay him 10%, and it's secured against property. So not only are we acquiring cash producing assets that aren't going to disappear, we are also able to make our friends phenomenal returns, and that feels really good. That's very fulfilling. So I think the biggest threats to borrowing money to acquire real estate is a drastic downturn in the market value, and it has to coincide with also wanting to get rid of that property. Because one of my mentors that has a couple hundred properties here in the area, he went through the 07-08 crash, and one of the things that a lot of people that were investing in real estate in this area pointed out is that during these times, the rents did not go down. So while the values of the home did go down, the rents didn't. And that is really reassuring, because if you set things up on the front end to where you still are cash flowing in excess of the mortgage payment, and if rents didn't go down, if you're still able to rent out the property, then there's really no threat in you not being able to make the mortgage payments. So long as you don't have to offload a property during the downturn, then you should be okay. And I know there are types of debts that are called very quickly. So a lot of times people in the downturns, people experience like short-term lines of credits or short-term types of financing being called, where the lender, and being called, if you're not familiar, is a bank institution, whoever says, you know what, we want our money back in full right now. And a lot of times, especially if it's in real estate, then it's pretty illiquid in that you can't immediately do that generally as quickly as people want to get their money back. If they give you like a 30, 60-day window to get that done, it's very difficult. So long as you do not have too many, I guess, unsecured or short-term loans out there in a downturn, you should be pretty good. And I think just in talking to tons of lenders and other banks, again, this is all me just talking to lenders. It's very uncommon for 30-year, 20, 25, 30-year mortgages to get called like a line of credit or some sort of short-term loan would. So let's see if we have any questions now. When doing the Burr strategy, thanks, Ariane. Awesome tip. When doing the Burr strategy, can you refinance one at a time, or what's the advantage of doing multiple? You can definitely do one at a time. I am not a fan of the Burr strategy at all, so I'm going to object to the usage of that terminology. But yeah, you can do one at a time. And if you do one at a time, it might be better, because if you know, have less than 10 properties, if you haven't exhausted your Fannie Freddie loans yet, then you could probably get a 30-year at a lower interest rate. Doing multiple at one time is just honestly a convenient thing. It just beats doing one at a time, because like this past week, we appraised 36 properties, and we were just able to, over the course of 3 days, go and visit all of those. So I don't think, if you were to break it down in a fee basis, I don't think you're necessarily going to be saving any money by doing multiple, but it's definitely easier if you have the option to do it. I think having a blanket mortgage is just a little bit more convenient. Again, it's not our strategy to sell properties. So all of the properties that we are refinancing, we're not going to sell one off like during the middle of the loan. I think it gets a little bit complicated if you're trying to sell a property that has or is part of like a blanket mortgage or blanket loan. So doing one at a time, if you don't have many properties, is definitely probably the way to go, or if you're just getting started. The reason that we are doing so many is we are starting to just really ramp up our acquisitions. So we're buying 5 to 7 properties a month is what we've been pacing. So we've got multiple properties that are at like the same stage at one time. So it was really just a convenience thing. But I think so long as you are buying and refinancing properties, kind of however you have to get it done is probably the way to go. Because especially if you extrapolate the terms over the 20 to 30 year period, I think percentages really don't matter as much as people talk about. Like, it's really cool that loans are at historical lows at the moment, but you know, in the 70s, the loans on real estate were in the 10s, 12%, and people still made a fortune off real estate. So if you have your long-term glasses on, then, or your long-term perspective, however you can get it done is probably the best way. Let's see here. What are all of your action steps to purchase a foreclosure at the auction? Research county website, title search, title insurance, once purchased, getting out squatters. Let's see. So I definitely think researching the county website is the best. And by county website, I mean like wherever they actually have the foreclosures listed. So here in Dayton, it's Montgomery County. It's montgomerycountysheriff.org or something like that. And that is where they list out all of the foreclosures. And from there, you can go through the appraised value that the county has it of what the opening bid might be or what they expect for it to go for. You can just start researching all of the properties on that list. And hopefully, if there are squatters there during your like due diligence of just driving around and looking at the properties, it's definitely trespassing to go onto the property since you don't own it, since the county doesn't own it. It's still held in like the personal name or bank name, whatever it may be. So I wouldn't recommend doing that, of course. But anything that you can see or ascertain about the property, definitely do so. And at least here in Ohio, whenever you bid and win a property, you are then able to take the little receipt that the county gives you that has the property location on it and the purchase price or the sale price, whatever it was. And then you could take that to your title company and they could do the search. And there's a short window where if the title comes back with something crazy on it that won't be able to remove, you can actually back out of purchasing that property. So I wouldn't do a title search on the property that I haven't won. I get that question a lot when it comes to foreclosures. So I wouldn't do that just because you haven't even won it yet. And you would spend a lot of money doing title search on properties just with the intentions of bidding on them, because you never know what's going to happen at the actual auction. 37. This is one of my favorite people. Man, I need to stand up when I put comments on the screen. This thing is so tall. All right, your previous post, recession-proof mindset. How have you built upon that, and what tips have you used when faced with short-term pitfalls to look at staying guided on the 10, 15, or 15, 20-year big picture? Man, so I am not experienced enough in life to have truly experienced a recession. When '08 happened, I was 18. I really didn't have anything to lose. I wasn't affected at this. I think just the overall mindset is the goal to have here, and I think that is what you need to really stay grounded on. I think talking to people that are a lot more experienced, that have had portfolios during the '08. I think talking to people that have lost a great deal. I think talking to people that went through that same recession that didn't lose anything. I think really just having as many conversations as you possibly can about whatever you are afraid of. If you can just survey a variety of people and figure out what their input is on the situation, I think that would really give you peace of mind. I am a Christian, but I'm also a huge fan of Stoicism. And one of the main kind of pillars of Stoicism is going ahead and just thinking through the worst possible outcome and making peace with it. So kind of to circle back to the question that I was asked about how I got comfortable with debt, starting this entire thing, since I understand the future value of a dollar formula, since I can think 30 years in advance, I mean, you can too. I'm not saying there's anything special about me. I'm just saying I fully embodied and understood the future value of a dollar formula. So whenever I am thinking about losing a great deal of money, well, I just turned 30. So I still have 30 years left for retiring age. So I'm still in the age bracket where I have the time to invest a great deal of money, Lord willing, and see the compound interest take effect. So if the worst case scenario is me losing everything, then I should probably be more prone to risk and take on riskier things now, when I still have time on my side to make up for any sort of major correction in the market, if that occurs. Now, if any of my friends or family is listening to this that do invest with me, no, I have no intentions of losing any money at all. I'm just kind of explaining the mindset that I have of it's better to take on a great deal of risk while you are young than waiting until you're closer to retirement age to then try and take on the same risk. So recession-proof mindset, I definitely think you have to have one. And I think a lot of people get caught up in imagining or letting the news or thinking, especially like the doomsday preppers and all of these people, like if America even were to like completely fall on its face or get taken over by someone else, like what are the societal or economic impacts that can possibly have, and how can one thrive under those new conditions? I think if there are still people, if there are still needs to be met, then all of the, and if the government allows businesses to be private still, then those are really the only three things that you need to have like a viable business or to meet the needs of people in exchange for some sort of value. So just trying to think as deeply as possible about all of these things and really planning for that, I think, is my advice, not to go off too many rabbit holes. Good morning from Detroit. All right, Chuck T. Let's see here. When did you move from buying one property a month to multiple purchases in a month? That's a great question. I don't know. The first property that we purchased was in August of 17. I think the second property was in sometime early 19. I think when you buy a lot of properties, you realize how capital intensive real estate is. So when I bought the first duplex, we ran out of cash pretty quickly because we were buying them in cash. So I would say whenever I got comfortable taking on debt, to your question, is whenever we really started ramping up our acquisition. Whenever I started learning how to buy properties at a pretty deep discount, how to uh, walk people through kind of the first position mortgage investing, where they buy the first mortgage on properties that we put under contract. I think learning how to do that is when I really started ramping up the acquisitions. And that really came from just kind of positioning myself under a mentor that was able to walk me through those things. JJ. Hello, JJ. How much money did you need to make for this to happen? I don't understand that question. Would you mind asking it in a different way, sort of? And also, I've been struggling with this because you comment a lot, and I'm a huge fan of saying people's names right. And I even did a Google search on this. Do you say it Lewis or Louis? I would like to know the answer to that too. I had fun. Thanks, 37, for asking that question. That was a good one. I like that a lot. I struggle with this a lot, honestly. I mean, it's one of those things where I made a vow to myself to never do anything that only paid me once. So consequently, that's one of the reasons like I don't flip properties. That's one of the reasons that I was drawn towards the property and casualty side of insurance rather than the life insurance sales. You definitely make a lot more money selling life insurance, and that's how I got started, was in life insurance, but I couldn't sleep at night because I never knew where my next paycheck was coming from, even though I was making a great deal of money. So I really struggle in watching like other people make a great deal of money while I'm spent focusing on a lot of things that are residual. They're definitely a lot stronger over time, but I would much rather have 10 properties that make like $100 per month than make $1,000 in 1 month. And this is a super nuanced conversation. I spend tons of time wrestling with this mentally to keep myself on track, but I definitely think that 30 years from now, residual income and building a strong base that is not like so large. Like I would rather have 10 properties paying $100 per month than one property paying $1,000 per month. And the whole reason for that is just diversification. And, something could happen to a few of those properties and I would still have a partial amount rather than if one person moved out and I'd start losing $1,000 a month. Lewis, not Louis. The question is answered. I can now sleep at night. All right, let's see here. How much did you need to make money-wise, like a $5,000 a month in cash flow, you moved over to using other people's money? So when I borrow other people's money, it's based on the property, not really the cash flow of it. So the main thing that I make sure of is whenever I borrow someone else's money as the like first position mortgage on a property, is what I'm buying worth more than the money that I'm getting? So even though when it's private money, like a lot of times I don't think I explain this well in the Deals Explained videos because like just recently I bought a property for $25,000, but I borrowed $45,000 against that property. We were able to buy it at a great discount. And we borrowed $45,000. So at closing, we got a check for around 20 grand. But once that 20 grand is put into that property, the property is going to be worth closer to 60 or 70. So we're still kind of abiding by the same 75% loan to value that the banks would hold you to if you were to go through a traditional lender. But in the meantime, I have kind of set the investor up for success because once I actually make those repairs, their $45,000 property is going to be secured, their $45,000 of cash is going to be secured on the property that is of greater value. So not only that, but also the cash flow. If I were to somehow default and they were to get the property, then they would actually start making more money because they would be getting 100% of the rental income minus the management fee or whatever that is, rather than just the interest or principal payment that I'm giving them. So I don't really think it's based on how much money I needed to make. And keep in mind, my brother and I do not take any money out of the real estate business at all yet. So all of the money that we are making, we're putting back into the properties or acquiring additional properties with it. So my brother has a job that, pays for his monthly expenses. I've got this insurance agency that pays for our monthly expenses. We just are building up this real estate investing portfolio, which is on the same train of thought as to why we don't budget for capital expenditures or repairs and maintenance. Because if we're not taking any money out, then why do we have to earmark different funds for those things if the cash flow is going to take care of that and the reserves are going to take care of that? Anywho, what do you object to the Burr strategy? No, I've never been asked this before, and I've been trying to figure out how to make a video on this. Oh, thanks, man. I'm happy that you found out about the YouTube channel, and I'm happy you are listening to it. What I dislike, I'm going to take that off so that you can see all of my face, because even though my eyes are still visible, I just hate all the viewers out there not being able to see all of my beard. That's important to me. Not really. That was a good joke, though. The Burr strategy, I just hate the way that it's marketed. I think it kind of sets people up for failure. I built this insurance agency. The majority of my clients are other real estate investors. I've met tons of people from bigger pockets that are out-of-state investors that buy properties here in Ohio that have the sole intentions of doing this Burr strategy. And there's just so many asterisks. There's so many nuances and fine points and fine print that should go along with the marketing of the Burr strategy. And I haven't looked back at this in quite some time. So if Bigger Pockets went back and actually laid out a more in-depth, like what to expect when attempting to execute this strategy, then that's great. They probably should, but it doesn't really align. Sure, on a real estate investing perspective, it makes tons of sense, but it's hard to reconcile that with like banking and insurance and contractors and I guess all of the things that go into it. So like, let's say the Burr strategy is set up on doing it in a very quick timeline. So if you buy, rehab, rent out a property, let's say you could do that in like 2 months. Well, that's great. And you have a phenomenal rental property, but that doesn't mean that any bank is willing to give you a loan on that property to help you refinance, because there's the seasoning requirements. So you might have to wait for 6 months, a year. Some seasoning requirements are like 18 months, some 2 years. That's one of the things that the banks have the liberty of changing whenever they so choose or feel is necessary. So I don't think it's very transparent or upright to try to rush people through the buying, rehabbing, and renting part to get to the refinance part, just so they can be held up by some sort of lender. Now, yes, there are lenders that don't have any seasoning requirements, but then there might be property minimums. Like that's one of the things that we run into a lot, whereas a property has to be over like $50,000 in value or $75,000. Again, the banks have the latitude of making their own rules and regulations, especially when it comes to rental. These are the things that fluctuate a great deal depending on the market. So that is one of the issues that I have a problem with. I also, I don't know, it's kind of like the diets, right? Like, I don't know anything about keto diets, but I imagine it's already been done before. So this Burr strategy really just took real estate investing and tried to like rebrand real estate investing. Because if you look at things over like a 30-year perspective, then buy, rehab, rent, refinance, and repeat. That's what Burr stands for. So that is almost fully encompassing of real estate investing. I think the only things that aren't included are sell or like live in. So if you added selling and living in rather than renting out, then you're talking that fully envelops what real estate investing is. So why do we have to call it something different? Is it just a timeline that makes it different? Otherwise, it's exactly the same as what everybody has been doing for a very long time. So That's my beef with it. Was that helpful, Ariane? And I get it. I'm ridiculous. I'm absurd. So I'm sure the Burr strategy has helped tons of people. I like this question a lot. Do you advise using business credit or hard money loans for rehabs after 6 to 12 months refi to pay it off? I have sweat equity for the down payment, but I'm struggling as a newbie. Business credit, if you can, so this is another thing, Ariane, that I kind of have an issue with, and that is business credit and hard money loans. So if you're a newbie, I mean, I get it. One of the hardest parts about real estate investing is the capital, because real estate investing is super capital intensive. So I'm also pretty sensitive to this no money down real estate investing, because it really opens people up to be super, super vulnerable and be kind of overexposed. Because if you somehow manage to get a rental property without any money down, then if something goes wrong, where is the money going to come from that is going to fix whatever went wrong with the property? And also, if you are a lender and someone has a property, why in the world would they give you money on it? Sure, the property might be fine, but you still have to personally qualify, especially when you're starting out. So if you have business credit, I'm not opposed to using that if you somehow got it. But at the same time, if you're a newbie, how did you get this business credit? Because building business credit isn't necessarily an easy thing to do. I know there's a lot of courses being sold on how to build business credit, or people that are coaches that help you build it. But at the same time, if you can't show income, if you can't show history, then I'm really confused as to why someone would extend you credit in order to buy or get into real estate investing. It seems like a really risky thing, unless the interest rate is extraordinarily high, in which case I'm not necessarily opposed to buying properties or acquiring properties with a really high interest rate, because if the cash flow is there to support that, and you plan to refinance it after 6 to 12 months to pay it off, I think that's okay. I think I'd have to check with my brother. We may have bought a property on a credit card once or twice, but we have a credit card that's at 8.5%, which is a local credit union. You should definitely become friends with your local credit unions. Hard money loans, I try to stay away from those because of the points, the origination fees, and all of the expenses. So I guess if I were given the choice of not buying a property or buying a property with a hard money loan, I would definitely pick buying the property with a hard money loan. But in the future, I would do everything that I could to set myself up to never need to use a hard money lender ever again. And the reason is just because, especially if this is something that you're looking to do a lot and very often, then those origination fees are really going to start adding up. But again, if the cash takes care of it, like I know a lot of people that flip using hard money loans, but their margins on the flip is like, a lot of money, like 50, 60 grand. So what's it matter if you're paying an additional $3,000 for financing if you stand to make 50 or 60 grand? So I think in those circumstances, it's okay. But if you add these up compared to the cash flow of rental properties, I think that's pretty steep. I think that's a tall order. So however you need to get started, for sure. I said all of the things that I just said about borrowing money, business credit, being a newbie, and all of that. But that's kind of life. There's always this trade-off of risk and reward. So if you have no money, if you have some knowledge about how to do these things, but you mentioned sweat equity. So yes, at some point when most real estate investors are getting started, unless you have a really high paying job and tons of reserves, at some point you're overexposed because you have to take on an extraordinary amount of risk in order to get to this reward. Now, over time, you're going to minimize your risk by not utilizing business credit or hard money loans, or having your own capital to put into a deal so a bank is more willing to work with you. But yes, there's definitely a period where you have to be more risky rather than less risky. Hope that was helpful, T310. Sounds like a law enforcement thing. That sounds like a squad car. I mean, with your own confidence to reach out to get private money, what made you comfortable with doing private money? Don't you worry about not being able to pay them back? Um, I think on this one, I would probably be most worried on the rehab process. So, like, let's just use that same uh, example that I was just speaking of, where I bought a property for 25,000 and borrowed 45,000. I would say I'm most concerned because until I make those rehabs, the property isn't worth 60 or 70 grand. So a lot could go wrong. I could get kind of ripped off by a contractor. It could cost more than I borrowed to fix the property, in which I'd have to put my own money in there to make the property to finish it appropriately and to get it to the point where it can rent out. But again, I think if you make peace with like the worst possible scenario and even try to figure out how to make the worst possible scenario more advantageous, then you're probably going to be okay. Yes, I definitely, before I took out my first like private money loan, I definitely had just a little bit of a track record to where I knew what I was doing. I think we had 4 or 5 properties before I started using private money. So I kind of sort of had a vague understanding of what I was doing. And I would still put myself in that category. There are so many things that I don't know. Um, but if I am not able to pay them back, then it's the money that I've borrowed is secured by the property. So if I default, then they would get the property, and the property is worth what it is that the research showed it's worth. I'm not making up those numbers. And I'm only paying them a fraction of what it would be paid, what the tenant would be paying or the resident would be paying on a monthly basis. So they would actually make more money if I weren't able to pay them back. They could either sell the property for the full after repair value, or they could sit back and collect a greater amount of rents. Now, they might want to get like a property management company, and that would have its own issues, but that's outside of the transaction between me and the private money lender. And then the other things that could go wrong, something could happen to me personally, which life insurance or some other sort of insurance should take care of. And then I'm not a criminal and I have no ill intentions. So I'm not going to buy a property for a little bit of money, borrow a lot of money against it, and run off. I wouldn't do that either. So, I mean, there's a lot of risk in it. But at the same time, I think with between our reserves, between my like ethics and my intentions, and then between just like thoroughly thinking through all of the things that could go wrong, I'm pretty comfortable. But at the same time, I'm also a lot more open to taking on risk because I am younger. I do have a lot of time to recover. Worst case scenario. And don't forget, because I am young, I might be super naive and everything I'm saying could be wrong. Oh, hilarious. I see that 27 people are watching, and I hope at least one person chuckled at my joke. When I started this whole YouTube channel, and I was reflecting with one of my good friends this morning on this, is of all of the people that I have ever met, I am probably the least likely individual that I ever would have picked to like start a YouTube channel and actually have fun doing it. I never expected myself to do this. Most people, when they meet me, are super intimidated by me. I have this, what do they call it? RBF, my old face. I remember being in like elementary school, in like second grade, looking in the mirror and practicing facial expressions because I got so tired of people asking me like why I was so angry all day. So I'm having the time of my life doing this, and you guys are awesome for putting up with me. What do you think of using database services such as PropStream? Is it worth it? That's a great question. I know nothing about PropStream. Databases get their information from somewhere. So generally, the places the databases get their information from are public record. So they may have put everything using their big technological software skills to make it more user friendly. But you can probably get all of the information yourself and sort through it on an Excel spreadsheet. And I think looking back on it, I hear a lot of people talk about sweat equity. I have never fixed anything in any of our rental properties, and I have never done any work to include the smallest of things like changing light bulbs. So I think if I were to be fair in this and as an assessment to myself, the sweat equity that I did put in was avoiding things like hard money and databases and all of those things. So I have gone through databases several times before. You can go onto the auditor's website generally in most counties and download like a full list of all of the parcels in the entire county. And then you could sort through those by land use codes. So the information that you would get from the databases is generally are probably public record, or you could find it and sort through it by yourself rather than paying them. But again, it might not be worth your time if PropStream's like $5 or $10 a month. I really don't know anything about PropStream. So I don't know what that is, but putting together your own list of private lenders, sorting through your own data, and trying to like drive for dollars and find properties that are vacant in good area and areas that you're interested in. I think those are 3 ways of putting in like your own kind of sweat equity, so to speak, without any sort of actual construction or repair knowledge. I hope that makes sense. Let's see. Man, I have lost place. This is awesome. Let's see here. Oh, yeah. What a throwback. I remember when we were talking about this. It is great marketing. Let's see, you're getting my 12th property in 3 months. You are awesome. Great work. But determining if I should start doing commercial real estate, how do you decide when to trade up? That's a great question. Let me know what goes into your decision for this, because I have yet to trade up. I am putting my first like kind of sort of pseudo commercial property under contract later today. But the only reason I'm comfortable in doing so is because on the second story, there are 2 residential units that are rented out. And that makes my brain comfortable with the entire transaction. I have no knowledge of commercial real estate, and I think that's one of the cool things about real estate investing is there is so much to know and so much to learn that you could be successful in real estate in like a myriad of different ways. I've got no idea as far as like when to trade up or what to do. One thing that I have noticed in just my strategy is there are not many lenders out there that are interested in properties with such low values. So it would most certainly be easier from a lending financing perspective for us to buy larger properties, but you would trade a little bit of returns in that because our returns are higher because the values are lower, but the rents are about the same. But the banks are a little bit more difficult to find or keep up with. So yeah, keep me updated on how you determine when to do that. I honestly think it's a time thing. You're probably going to reach a bandwidth thing, and if you have more capital on your hands than tiny properties to deploy it with, then it might be easier from both a lending and buying perspective to buy one deal with your money rather than 13. Thanks, man. I just wanted to pull this up and laugh at it again. It's good to have good personal credit when building business credit, for sure. I once did a loan with a bank. They're a small credit union, and there is so much information on personal guarantees and how to get non-recourse loans. So the only conversation that I had like with a lender about these personal guarantees, he told me that you had to get to like the size of like Procter and Gamble before they stopped with the personal guarantees. And I've talked to some people that were worth like $50, $100 million, and they still personally guarantee some of the loans that they have done. Now, one guy that I talked to around 50 to 100 million in, as far as his net worth goes, he negotiated personal guarantees down. So he would only personally guarantee like a small fraction of the overall loan size, but nonetheless, the personal guarantee is still on there. So I'm sure that it makes great marketing to talk about non-recourse loans, but especially in the market that I'm in, I don't necessarily think it's too much of a reality. So I find myself having similar conversations about personal credit, business credit, personal guarantee, and non-recourse. And I don't know much about the space, but from all of the like preliminary research, all of the times I've tried to look into it, I haven't found much information on it. But personal credit, for sure. I wrecked my personal credit recently because I had no idea what went into personal credit. And I made a video about that. I was able to fix it pretty quickly, fortunately, but now I know everything that goes into personal credit. So watch out. I'm on it now. Always keep your personal credit as best as you possibly can. And honestly, once you understand what goes into it, it's pretty easy to not make the wrong decisions that would get you a bad credit score. Now, I'm not saying that people with bad credit scores have made stupid mistakes. Well, I mean, maybe that would go hand in hand, but I'm not trying to be rude about it. I don't know how to clean up that mess I just made using the words that I did. Do you get all your deals from the county auction? No, Jose Zapata. I get very few of my deals from the county auction, but I think I've purchased around 8 from the auction, maybe. The majority of my deals come from word of mouth. I own an insurance agency where all we do is write insurance for real estate investors. I would say I have purchased somewhere around 17 or 18 properties from clients. The rest are like words of mouth from wholesalers, other real estate investors, and the auction. The MLS, I buy a lot of properties on the MLS, but there are properties that will sometimes, once you really know your market and you know what properties sell for and what areas, depending on the condition they're in, then if you're truly focusing on one area, you can see if a realtor has, for whatever reason, grossly underpriced the property, which happens more frequently. So probably here lately, I have purchased 4 or 5 properties off the MLS within the first day of them being posted because I don't think the realtor priced it appropriately. But hey, who knows? We have to wait a few years to see how this really pans out. The joke could be on me, and I could be the one that's wrong. Maybe I overpaid for them. What is your mindset on wholesaling? Do you think it is good for beginning investors? I think wholesaling and flipping properties is awesome to raise capital for investing in real estate. I think if you were to truly put this out over 30 or 40 years, then again, I made that vow to myself to never do anything that only pays me once. So I don't want to do wholesaling because you'd get paid once, and I don't want to flip properties because it would only pay you once. And I think buying rentals and holding on to rentals makes you a lot more money than those two activities over like 30 or 40 years. But the problem is you're really not going to realize that until 30 or 40 years from now. So probably when you're first starting out, I would say anything that you can do to make more money is probably what you should focus on. If you have a high-paying W-2 job and you could do freelancing on the side to make a lot more money, to invest in real estate, buy and hold, then I think that's what you should do. If you do not have a high-paying W-2, but you really want to get involved in real estate and you want to slowly or quickly build up more capital to buy rentals, then wholesaling and flipping is definitely a good strategy. My biggest advice would be not to be a slave to like the golden handcuffs, because a lot of times when people get to flipping, they kind of get on this hamster wheel. It's like, okay, well, I made $30,000 on that one flip. Let me do it again. And then if you're not careful, if you're not appropriately utilizing the funds that you make from those transactions into real estate or some sort of residual type thing, then now you're creating this hamster wheel golden handcuffs thing where you have to keep flipping and keep wholesaling in order to maintain that lifestyle that you've built or maintain just like the amount of money that you have coming in. So don't get caught up in that. But if it's a means to an end, for sure. But don't let flipping or wholesaling be that thing that you do. Sweet background. It sure is, man. Sweet profile picture. I just found 2 great deals because of PropStream. I should know about them. This is so delayed, and this is fun. Let's go back up. I cackled. Thanks, Blake. Is that a skull, an octopus, and a pineapple? That's incredible. You fit a lot into that profile picture. Residents don't like the word tenants. I do my best not to say the word tenants. Thanks for picking up on this, 37. And are you kissing penguins in this profile picture? Fascinating. Residents, for sure. Residents over tenants. People live there. I just feel like tenants, over the hundreds of years that word has been used here lately, it's just kind of a little bit more condescending or whatnot. And it might not be, but I definitely try to say residents when I catch myself trying to say tenants. But like all the books and everything says the word tenants. So residents, the people aspect. I have talked about my law enforcement background for quite some time, and we just took over property management over the past 4 months or so. And I had this horrible presumption that the majority of the residents would be similar to dealing with like the worst people that I remember dealing with in law enforcement. And that couldn't be further from the truth. Like I shared earlier in the live stream, we did appraisals on 36 properties, which included the interior inspection, and the majority of these properties, they're just immaculate. People maintain them so well. And I'm a huge fan on that same token. This is like a chicken or the egg type statement, because I don't know if well, let me just say what I'm saying, and then I'll try to clean it up afterwards. I'm a huge fan of front loading our capital expenditures. So when we first buy a property, like the one that I've been talking about, the $25,000 purchase price, we borrowed $45,000 against it. We're going to, put in new mechanicals, redo the bathroom, the roof, the kitchen. So all of these things are going to be brand new whenever we rent the property out. So it's my kind of belief. I could be way off basis, but because I am giving over an above average product, perhaps people are more encouraged or motivated to keep it in above average condition. But again, I voiced that once and someone was just like, I don't know. I don't think what you're doing is so powerful that it would cause a messy person to become a clean person. And I totally agree with that. So he thinks it has more to do with the screening process than it does the rehab of the property, which may very well be true. But man, I think getting out, talking to the people that rent from you and forming phenomenal relationships with them is probably the way to go. And I mean, just treating people like people that deserve to have, above average living conditions, I think that goes a long way. I mean, when people reach out to us with an issue, there are times in which we don't fix things. Mainly, the only thing that I can think of off the top of my head are, I think, smaller pests like rodents and mice and whatnot, and bugs. Those fall under the responsibilities of the tenants. But if are the residents, see, look, I'm doing it. I guess I'm not fully convinced in myself that those fall under the residents' responsibility. But if it's like raccoons or whatnot, I mean, that's totally on us. Or if we have provided like a faulty product, so like if there's a gaping hole in the foundation where any rodent that's out there could fit into it, well, for sure, that's on us. But other than that, I mean, generally, we try to do everything extraordinarily quickly whenever we're prompted to. So treating people like people, I mean, and again, one of my biggest driving factors is making the community a better place. So since that's my motivation, I mean, when people reach out to me, it's kind of like the rubber meets the road, right? I can either do something to help that house, that individual, and consequently the community, or I could be a jerk wagon. And I do my best. It's actually one of my life goals to not be a jerk wagon. Thanks, man. 37, you ask so many awesome questions. Would you buy a home now or wait on the market crash to get a better deal? This is an awesome question, Rodney Harris, and one that I get asked frequently. And I am a huge fan of recounting this because when I first moved to Ohio from North Carolina, for the first 4 months, I commuted. So each weekend, I would drive back to North Carolina, and each week, at the end of each weekend, I would drive up here to Ohio to work for the week. So I had a lot of screen time or windshield time. So I listened to a lot of books, did a lot of podcasts, and this was back in 2016. Or was it 2017? I'm confused at this point. But back then, when I was first getting started into real estate investing, everybody swore up and down that a recession was coming, that the housing market is about to crash. And I think it probably will at some point because that's the way the world works. But I don't think waiting on it is a good idea. If I waited on the crash, then I wouldn't have the portfolio that I have. I don't necessarily feel overexposed or vulnerable if the market were to crash. Again, that might be me being naive, but I am not a fan of using waiting on the sidelines as a strategy. I think being the man in the arena in that Roosevelt speech is probably the way to go. And I think you make mistakes, you learn from them, you pivot. Um, and the quicker that you can get into the arena, probably the better. I mean, I think getting your first deal done, obviously you don't want to lose money. Losing money is never a good strategy. But on your first deal, it's more about getting it done than it is on how much money you make or lose. PropStream is $100 a month. You know, I tried not to say this each time PropStream was mentioned, but PropStream seems perfect. They reached out to me and wanted me to do like a video for them in exchange for some sort of affiliate thing. So if you see that, know they got a hold of me, but I don't know anything about them. Decided to fully commit to real estate investing. What are the first 3 things I should do? Well, according to your screen name, one of the first things you should do is sell dope. Is that I should sell dope? Perhaps I should read these when they're in the column on the right before I click on them to put them on the screen. I don't know, man. Don't sell dope. Don't do that. So the first thing you should do is get a legitimate W-2 job or a skill that legally adds value to the world. And then reading, educating yourself about real estate investing, all the things that could go right and all the things that could go wrong. Networking with other real estate investors. I would network with new people along with super experienced and seasoned people. I would get a good mix of people. In the midst of this pandemic, I think networking has become a little bit more difficult, but nonetheless, I think there are still some like virtual meetups and whatnot going on. So I would definitely overexpose yourself to the world of real estate investing and then figuring out like what makes you excited, what sort of niche that you want to get into. For me, I found that I'm a huge fan of single family homes and using that as an avenue to do my very best to kind of rebuild an area of the community. So that's what makes me excited. And because I have that focus, I kind of filter out all the other options of real estate investing through that. So as tempting as it is to get into commercial space or multifamilies, I'm really just sticking to what I've set out to do. So increasing your income, number 1, via legal methods, networking with other real estate investors, and educating yourself. Doors, property, cash flow, financing. Getting deals and all the numbers is good, but at the root, which I'm learning, you deal with people. For sure. I think the hardest part about making money or the hardest part about life are the people that you have to deal with. So I do my very best to only associate myself with people that I really enjoy dealing with and limiting the exposure that I have to all of the people that I dislike dealing with. So perhaps that's why I find so much solace in YouTube. You guys are awesome. Who are some of the YouTube channels that you followed in the beginning? Ashamedly, Graham Stephan, Meet Kevin. Let's see here, Bigger Pockets, huge fan of Bigger Pockets. I was on Bigger Pockets for a long time. The more I started learning about real estate investing, the less I enjoyed reading other people on Bigger Pockets. I disagree with the vast majority of the way people talk about real estate investing, which is why I started a YouTube channel and why I love talking about real estate investing to people that don't know about real estate investing, because it's so nuanced, it's so individualistic. It really depends on your overarching why, what you want out of life, what you want out of your investments, what kind of returns you want, your personality. I mean, all of this goes into real estate investing. It's not just about, I guess the root of it is buying properties, making them better, and getting returns. But there are so many different avenues of doing that that you can really tailor to your individual liking. And I think that's one of the reasons I love real estate investing. Good morning from Cincinnati. All right. The Newport Aquarium is not in Cincinnati. It is in northern Kentucky, right on the border. And that's one of my favorite places to take my kids. We haven't been there since the pandemic started. But also, fun fact, when I get homesick from North Carolina, I like to go to the Newport Aquarium because it makes me feel like I'm in the South again, even though it's just an hour south. Being able to say that I'm in Kentucky brings my soul a little bit of good. What interest rate terms do you offer your first position mortgage holders? 10%, 12%, 8%, 8 to 12%. I think our highest is at 13.6%. I'm not proud of that, but it is there. 8% is our lowest. It really depends on the property, the equity position, like how good of a deal we got on it. Like this Project Firehouse that I'm doing. We bought it for 10 grand. We're going to have to put around 30 or 40 into it, and it's probably going to be worth 100, 110. That's probably going to be one of the best deals that I've ever done. So it really comes down to the individual, the deal, and what people are kind of expecting and how quickly I need to get this money to close the deal. And generally we offer between 2 and 5 year balloons. In total transparency, I should have said 1 to 5 year balloons. I think the shortest loan that we have is a 1 year balloon, which was entirely too short because that doesn't give you enough time to get into a property, get it stabilized, and refinance. That's a super short window. I would never recommend that anyone do a 1 year loan. The longest that we have is 10, and that's entirely too long. 10-year interest only, you're leaving a lot of principal pay down on the table. I wouldn't recommend doing that. I'm totally okay with taking out higher interest loans so long as the deal justifies it. I think one of the cool things, being able to like look throughout history and like the loans, is you can see that loans go all the way from like 0 to like 18% on real estate. So as long as you are somewhere in there and can make it work, you're probably doing okay. If we were to go over 18% rates from banks on real estate investing, that would be uncharted territory, I believe, unless you guys know something I don't. So for as far as like a historical thing, we're running really light on interest rates. We can get very low financing, which is a great thing. Not law enforcement, but definitely local government. All right, T310. The law enforcement, the department I worked for, the corporals always had even numbers. The sergeants were 300, 400, 500. The corporals were like 310, 320. So just your name alone makes me think very highly of you. Good morning from Jacksonville, Florida. That's where my brother lives. You should hang out with him. You have another question. That's all right, because I respect you, because in my head, you're a corporal. I want to invest out of state, particularly Ohio. I like to think that I had something to do with that. Is it best to go with turnkey properties or just get a property off the MLS and do light cosmetic rehab and build my own team? Well, I did a video on my thoughts about turnkey properties. I would not recommend anyone use a turnkey company. I think generally turnkey companies charge too much for properties. If you do use a turnkey company, I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater here. Do your own research, find your own comps, and make sure that you are not walking into a situation where you're going to be like $20,000 or $30,000 underwater as soon as you purchase the property. You definitely want to have the ability to resell it if necessary. So just be is it weary or leery? Either be weary or leery of turnkey companies. Do your own research and make sure that apart from that company, it's still a good deal. I would really encourage you to find properties on your own via the MLS, especially if you're out of state. Then kind of what I said earlier about collecting your own information from databases and the other things that I said about being able to like provide sweat equity without actually swinging hammers or doing the own work. So as an out-of-state investor, I would say your sweat equity comes not from doing the work on the interior yourself, but finding the deals yourself, putting together your team, finding your own contractors, not the ones that a realtor or some other person points out to you. I would say, because the more hands that are in the pot, the more people want overrides and the more people that want to make money off of you. And unfortunately, just from where I sit as a little old insurance agent, I see a lot of out-of-state investors just get raked over the coals financially from turnkey companies and other vendors. So I don't have the stomach to be an out-of-state investor. I really like being local and hands-on and being able to like drive around and double check things. But I definitely know a lot of people that have done a great job at being an out-of-state investor. So I'm not trying to make you shy away from it, but I would just say you really want to hold yourself to an extraordinarily high standard of your own due diligence. Did I answer all of that? Yes, I did. I just want to put this up here so that everybody else knows you fixed your error too. My insurance company wouldn't insure me for my full purchase price. Did I overpay? I built a house in North Carolina and I was not able to insure the property for the full price. But that's because it was on 17 acres and the value of the land, because the land can't burn down, and the liability. So if somebody snuck on my property and somehow broke an ankle and wanted to sue me, the liability would extend over the land, but the land in and of itself can't really be harmed, burned down, or somehow lost or disappear. So it's not insured. So the value of the land was not included in the insured value. So I would just make sure that the replacement cost, if you have access to like the MCB, I can't remember all the names of it, but I would just do maybe a quick, the due diligence that I know to tell you how to do. Oh man, that's awesome. I've kept this disclaimer up there this entire time, so I can say whatever I want to. I would do your due diligence is in terms of like the replacement cost calculator, and make sure that you are insured for like if the property did burn down and you want to rebuild it, that you at least get that price. But a lot of the areas where the land is more valuable, it's really tough to insure a property for the full amount that you paid because a portion of that is included in the land price. In order to obtain traditional mortgage loans, am I best to show 1099 or W-2 income, or is there a difference from the lender's point of view? So I'm not a lender, but I have made a lot of money in both of these. And I would say that W-2 is always superior to 1099. And W-2, the banks really favor that because it's predictable. It comes in generally every 2 weeks, whereas 1099, you are technically your own business. So some banks require that you have like 2 years experience before they take 1099 or like self-employment income seriously, whereas the rules aren't necessarily so strict when it's W-2. W-2 is always better if you can get it. That being said, I have no W-2 income. You're right, and I owe you an answer. Phoenix, Arizona. A question that is not on here is a 1,650 square foot house. How much should you expect to pay for a roof? So the homes that I have replaced the roofs on that are similar to that, when it comes to roofs, it really depends on the layers and the underlying decking. I would say if everything works perfectly and it's just like one layer, and the decking is perfect, then you might be at like $4,000, $4,500 for a roof. And if a lot of other things need to be replaced, you're looking at like $8,000 or $9,000. And I agree with you. Being a beginner in learning all of this stuff takes an extraordinary amount of time, which is an inconvenience, but at the same time, in the midst of everybody, not everybody, but a lot of people being worried about being replaced by robots, I would say we're doing pretty good because real estate is not so much scalable from my perspective because they're so nuanced. You're not going to be, I don't think real estate investing is susceptible to being replaced by AI anytime soon. Thanks. Thanks, Ariane. I think I do have a good screening process. Oh, okay. Redemption. Redemption is here. Where did it go? Oh, just a name. There we go. Nobody should sell dope, and he does not do that. It's just a name. Can you give a breakdown of Section 8 voucher prices for 3 and 4 bedrooms in Dayton and the requirements of the house to be eligible? Andre Young, friend. Well, thank you for thinking that I have the answer to this. I think Section 8 prices for 3 and bedrooms, I might be able to answer that. I would say 3 bedrooms are probably in the $750, $800 range. 4 bedrooms are probably around the $1,000 range. I've got a really good friend that I call. His name is Paul. Whenever I have Section 8 questions, I don't do enough Section 8 to really understand all of these things. The people that do have a lot of Section 8 properties here in the area, the things that they complain about are the inspections primarily, and not that the inspections happen or that the inspections ask them to fix things. It is after the inspection happens, after everything is fixed, the inspector that subsequently comes out might not be the same as the first one. So in addition to all of the things that have just been corrected and inspected, the second inspector might look at other things and find other things that need to be fixed. And there's no, I guess, regulation or system in which the second inspector has to follow. So we all kind of wish that in these inspections, whatever happens or whatever is seen on the first one is the only thing that the secondary inspector comes out and looks at. But at the same time, generally all of these things have to be fixed at some point anyway. So it's not that the second inspector is wrong for pointing them out. It's just that unfortunately, Section 8 has the ability to withhold rents from you until these things are fixed, which puts some people in a precarious position depending on, their cash flow, their reserve situation, and whatnot. That's the only real complaint that I've heard about Section 8. Otherwise, here in the area, it's all good. I have decided to forego purchasing a house and get into real estate investing. I've decided to buy a duplex or a property to rehab. What are your thoughts? What would be your action steps? If I had to start all over again and I had 0 properties, I would probably buy something that I could house hack a lot. I would really like to, and I have a family and almost 4 kids now. I say almost because we're due late November with our 4th kid, and his name will be Lincoln. And my first son, his name is Jackson, and neither of them were named after presidents. Although that's a hard sell to make. I would house hack. I would house hack a lot. I would try to buy like a 4-unit. And not only would I rent out the other units, but I would also rent out the other bedrooms in the unit that I lived in. That would be my game plan. I don't think I would rehab a property. I have like 3 crews that I keep fairly busy, and I'm still not really fully comfortable rehabbing properties. Rehabbing properties, there's a lot that goes into it. There's a lot that could go wrong. And you could easily lose a lot of money very quickly if there's something that you didn't see. So while you have the potential upside to make a lot of money if you rehab a property, there's also a massive amount of downside that you could experience if you miss something or if you get kind of taken advantage of by a contractor. So I guess I would be interested in your financial position a little bit more, and I would also be interested in if you are planning on doing this work yourself. If what you're saying here is you want to buy a property to rehab, to live in it while you rehab it, and you're willing to live in like less than desirable conditions while you're doing that, that might be a good idea. But I don't have the ability to do all of these things that you're saying. Thanks for creating your channel. My wife and I decided to get into buying real estate shows in Ohio. You've given me a lot of insight. Thank you, Jackson Experiment. And as I just shared about my first son, I'm a huge fan of your name. Oh man, I'm at the tail end of these questions. Do you all not have any more questions? You should ask a few more. If you are watching this and you have not typed a question in and you think you might have a question, you should ask it. I would enjoy that. Peace, everyone from Chicago. Nice. I really appreciate what you do and plan to follow in your footsteps with helping others. That's what this world's all about, right? Helping a bunch of other people. What is life if we're not like creating things for other people and like helping other people achieve what they want, especially if what they want includes creating other things that could also help other people. I listen to so much Jim Rohn, probably 2 or 3 hours a week. And I know I've shared that a lot, but you know, he passed away a while back. And the fact that I still get value out of listening to him really blows my mind. Like the amount of impact that he had and kind of how he was able to tap into like this timeless thing. And I guess we could go back even further than that because, you know, Think and Grow Rich, that's a classic. The Richest Man in Babylon is a classic. And these things were written a long time ago. The Wealthy Gardener, that's a phenomenal book. If you haven't read it yet, you should watch the book review that I did on it. And you should also buy the book and read it. And then after you read the book, you should listen to the interview that I got to do with John Safort. That was really surreal how that all came together. When I first did the book review, I had no concept or knowledge of this man. And I had never had a conversation with him. But it was cool. It was cool to be able to get in touch with the author and then interview him on the channel and just get to know more about him. That was really cool. If you do buy the book, just do me a favor though and go to the video and click the link because I make 44 cents each time someone buys the book using that link. Thank you, Phoenix, Arizona. Lewis Porter. I know how to say your name forever. What is the worst deal you made? That is my first foreclosure video that I've done. And I know that's not fair because it still turned out to be a good deal. I've said this a few times before, but I really place a high value on mentorship. And I would say one of the best things that I've done is put myself under the wings of others. And I kind of pride myself on being really coachable and taking advice really well. So before I make decisions, not all decisions, of course, but before I make a lot of decisions, I've got like a little pseudo like board of directors that I consult and have a ton of conversations if it has implications. I mean, with like real estate now, because I largely invest in the same area, I'm able to make my own decisions pretty quickly, but still each time, even in Dayton, if it's in an area that I'm not familiar with, I call probably 4 to 5 people and get their insights on that particular area before I agree to purchase a property. And it's been a while since I've been on the fence about buying a property because of the condition it's in, because I bought I got a few free properties from the city of Dayton. I say that when the dust settled, it was probably about $2,500 per property. We got 4 of them. And these have been abandoned for like 10 plus years. They had holes in the roof, a bunch of issues, but I was able to kind of walk through the rehab process of those. And because they were in such bad condition, the condition of which I'm comfortable with rehabbing is pretty horrible. So I don't know. I think that's a great question. I wish I could give you more answers on that. The worst deal I've ever done, though, I would say is still that first foreclosure. But because the market increased simultaneously to me rehabbing that property, we were able to only have $7,500 left in that deal when we got out of it. But had the market turned, we would have been a little bit more upside down, which isn't the end of the world. But I think that's part of the thing about real estate that I don't think many people talk about is at the end of the day, your worst deals in real estate investing just cost more money than expected. So if you have your 30 to 40 year goggles on, and this is a long-term investment, and it just cost more money than you expected, it's kind of just riding out a bad wave, but at some point, it's kind of going to make itself whole. So I guess as long as you have money to lose, which sounds arrogant because I don't know how to word what I'm trying to say, but all of the problems in real estate investing have a price tag. So it really just comes down to what price tag you're comfortable with, how much you have in your reserves, how much income you have coming in, what your overall long-term perspective on real estate investing is. I imagine as I continue to branch out into things that I don't know much about, like on the goals video, I shared that I want to start getting into commercial real estate investing. I don't know anything about that. So I imagine I'm going to make some bad mistakes there. That's true. House hacking is not always a viable option. I would say in some markets, it's not possible. When I had John Sephoric, the author of The Wealthy Gardener, on, him and I talked about, and again, everybody's situation is different and every market that people are in is different. So real estate investing can't really be talked about on a national level because it's truly market by market. But the cool thing is, like, I moved to Ohio from North Carolina, and if I stayed in North Carolina, the portfolio that I have and the opportunities available to me would look a lot different. And honestly, one of the only reasons that I moved to Ohio was because of a little guy that I met online. And when I say met, I just watched a lot of his videos, named Grant Cardone. And while my wife really dislikes him, and she gets frustrated each time she just hears his voice, but he really encourages people to move to where opportunity is. And I get that sometimes that's a tall order. Fortunately, I was young, and my wife and I just had our first kid, and we weren't overwhelmingly rooted in an area. But if it's a matter of like taking advantage of opportunities, and there are more opportunities in one area than another, than the area that you currently live in, it's probably best to move to a market that has more opportunity. I'm really looking forward to seeing how this pandemic plays out, since so many people can work remotely now. I'm really interested to see like what that does to California and other places that are super expensive because all of the tech companies or all of the money flowing through there. Right. Which, yeah, fourplexes, not four places for $1 million. Totally. I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily live in California for a multitude of reasons, but the real estate market being one of them. Are you familiar with Alabama's market? Mobile in particular? Mobile. I think that's how you say it. No, I don't know anything about Alabama's market. It is the Deep South, though. and I miss it a lot. That's the third time I asked that question. What question? What am I missing? The last thing you said was peace, everyone from Chicago. What are your thoughts on buying and holding condos? Is this the third time you've asked the question? I don't know anything about condos. I insure a few of them, and I know one gentleman who has a condo that he rented out and that he made it very nice. So I don't think it should be treated any differently than any other type of real estate investing, except for the like condo association fees. I think you should include those. And I think you should also just understand or go into investing in condos with the understanding that you don't have full control of that condo and you're always subject to the condo authority or whatever it's called, HOA, the HOA, but for condos. So if you're comfortable with the people that are running for that, or if you're willing to run for that and be a part of it just to have a little bit more control over your investment, I think that's okay. I definitely am a fan of it because it's real estate investing, but your control is a little bit limited. Hello. How do I start looking into properties? That's a great question. It really depends on how you want to get started. I would start by finding an area that you're comfortable investing in, especially if it's away from your house or if you're out of state. And I think the area is most important. Again, the majority of my real estate investing philosophy comes from building the community or whatnot. So I was drawn to the area that I am in because the majority of the commercial space is vacant. The houses are built extraordinarily well. There's just deferred maintenance on them. And it is also along the main thoroughfare between downtown and the, I guess, suburbs of Dayton. They have a little bit more money than Dayton. So it's a highly trafficked area twice a day when people are going to work and leaving work. That's how I came upon the area. And that's the main things that, I found really cool about the area that I'm in because it's almost like a blank canvas. Other than that, I would determine what types of returns you're looking for, get comfortable there, and then just start scrolling through and analyzing tons of deals via the MLS, Facebook, Craigslist. When I first started, I thought it was very prudent advice to analyze one deal per day until you just really get familiar and can kind of anticipate what type of returns you would get based just on the purchase price and the condition of the property. The devil's always in the details, but you can definitely practice analyzing properties and get pretty good at that. That's where I would start. I work here on visa. I want to invest in real estate, but I'm scared because of the uncertainty of my situation. You may not be able to answer this, but if you were in this situation, what would you do? That's a phenomenal question. So first off, awesome. Thanks for being here on visa. I have tons of respect for immigrants and people that move here from other places because it seems like the desire to make the best of all possible lives for yourself and your family is just a lot more intense than people that are, born here with all the opportunities that come along with being born here. So I've made some strong statements about America in the past where I think it's, the best of all places to live. And I think we live in like the best of all possible times to be alive, just based on all the opportunities that are here in front of us and all of the freedoms that we have here in America. So I know that's not your question, but that's what I kind of wanted to say. And since I'm really not a fan, I'm not a fan of planning to wait or planning to sit on the sidelines. And I'm a huge fan of fighting tooth and nail to make the ideal life that you have, that you like, the ideal life that you want for yourself and your family. So I think along the same sentiments that I just said about America, I think one of the most beautiful things about life is, for the most part, here where we live, you truly have the ability to design for yourself, work for yourself, and create for yourself the lifestyle that you want. So, uh, Rishi, maybe, I hope that's how you say it. Rishi, I don't know. I would say it starts with your why. So, having a really big, strong why is probably the best thing that you could have for yourself. And then kind of breaking that down and kind of reverse engineering what you have to do on like a daily, weekly, monthly basis is what you should start with. So if you have those two things already, so if you know exactly uh, your overarching why, like 50, 60, 70 years from now, looking back, what would you want to accomplish? What would you want people in your family and your community to remember you by? And then after you know that, once you come up with daily, weekly, monthly, yearly goals for yourself to achieve those things, then now it just comes to be about execution. So now, after you have all of that laid out, it really comes down to making the daily sacrifices of making sure and having the discipline to check off those things on a daily basis, pretty much by any means necessary. If it means working 16, 18, 20-hour days, whatever it is, so that you can create and achieve that life that you designed for yourself. I think that is. So fear is a really big motivator, but fear can also kind of be mitigated, analyzed, and kind of broken down. So I said it earlier in the live stream, but I'm a huge fan of Stoicism. So what is the worst case scenario for you? What is the uncertainty? So let's say if whatever uncertain things you're talking about, absolute worst case scenario, what's the outcome of that? And whatever that is, I would say first make peace with it and then start trying to mitigate it. So if you get into real estate investing and then your visa expires or you're not able to renew it and you're never able to come back, well, I know of a lot of people that not only are they out of state investors, but they are OOC. They are out of country investors. I've got some insurance clients from Israel, from Canada, from, that might be it. Nope, Australia, that are investing here in Ohio. So it's definitely possible to have like a property management company and to have like a local team built to help you manage the property that you own here. So whatever, I don't know the situation totally, but those are my overall arcing, like broad philosophical answers to the things that you're saying. Oh, Corporal, I'm starting to find out that this is definitely a long-term game. I don't know why Bigger Pocket Market There Info is essentially a fire movement type of company. I don't know, man. And I'm against the fire movement too, just as much as I'm against the Burr movement, because fire, like financially independent, retire early. I think that's what it stands for. And man, those rascals, like retire early for what? Like man is built, man is made for work. Like what are you going to do when you retire early? What's the goal here? Financial independence, totally get it. I don't think there's a better feeling than being able to provide for yourself apart from any company or relying on anyone else in any way. I think there's a lot of stuff spiritually that happens, emotionally that happens in achieving that. But retiring early, come on, let's call a spade a spade. What's retirement? So you can go do something that you find more meaningful. Well, let's not call that retire early. But I don't believe in the concept of retiring at all. Anyway, I think if you do some research on retirement and like where it came from, Otto von Bismarck, maybe, is that right? something. Anyway, there's allegedly retirement comes from that guy seeing that all of his like competition or enemies or whatever was like over 60. So he just like was in a position where he just had the government start paying for them to live without any requirements or responsibilities that they had to keep up with anymore. So that way he could just increase his power. I don't know what I'm talking about. Look me up. Look that up. Don't trust me. When you're doing a walkthrough on a property, what are the top 5 most important things to check for? That sounds like a video title if I've ever heard one. So obviously, I'm going to say everything that I want to say to answer this, and then we could collectively come up with the top 5. Galvanized. So I think, and again, real estate is built in like, phases. So a lot of Dayton that I invested in was built in like the 1920s. So they have issues that are unique to the houses built in this area during that time frame. Whereas your market might be completely different. It really depends on the history of where you're at. But here, I know that there's galvanized plumbing. That's pretty bad because of the way it corrodes on the inside. So if you do have galvanized plumbing present, then the chances of the water pressure being low are extraordinarily high. What a horrible way I worded that. Contrasting low versus high. Anyway, you should replace galvanized plumbing. So if the galvanized plumbing is still present, then it's likely that the kitchen and bath are both outdated too. So I like to look for the kitchen just to see like when those updates occurred, the bath, those updates. If there's plaster, I just like to make note of that because at some point plaster gives way, it kind of falls apart from the lath behind it, and you're going to have to either, the cheap fix is getting the thinnest drywall that you could find and just drilling it to the plaster. The right way to do it is removing all the plaster and putting up new drywall, which is expensive. But if it's functional, hold off, because that's all you really want to make a rental property is functional. You don't want to go above and beyond. Foundation issues. What I've learned about foundation issues is they are largely due to not appropriately diverting the groundwater. So if there are foundation issues, what I would immediately then look for is proper drainage. So make sure all the gutters are intact, not hanging down. Make sure that if there are gutters, they have the elbows or they go into drain tile and they're, going all the way out to the street. If there's a negative grade going towards the house, so all the rainwater, runs across the ground to the foundation, those are things that could be fixed. The roof, I like to know that the roof is in like when it was last updated. And generally you can kind of tell from the ground if the house isn't too tall and you can kind of see the roof, you can see the kind of texture on it. I have a really tough time telling about 3-tab shingles, especially if there's a tree nearby and there's like algae growing from like whatever the tree stuff is on the top of the roof. I have a tough time telling that just because the texture of 3-tab shingles is very strange. Sometimes it looks like it's really old and it's only like 3 or 4 years old if there are trees nearby. Other than that, I look for the electric. I definitely don't want knob and tube. But again, that is probably due to the time that a lot of these homes were built. I definitely like to make sure that all knob and tube was replaced, or there's at least like Romex going up to where the knob and tube enters the drywall from, or the plaster from the basement. Other than that, that's about it. I'm not really too concerned about windows because again, we're after it being functional. So if they're the original like single pane wooden windows, I'm not really too frustrated about that so long as they all work. If they're broken, of course they need to be replaced. But I mean, I guess that's it. I don't mind furnaces. I don't mind old furnaces. I don't mind the boilers or the gravity furnaces. I don't mind replacing those, especially if the ductwork is already present. Furnaces generally are around $2,500, $3,500 to replace. AC units, I don't mind replacing those. So of all of those things, as I said, I mean, I guess the roof is a big deal. Those can get really expensive, especially if there's a lot of layers. Other than that, the mechanicals, all of this goes to like the capital expenditures. And if you have to replace those, then I'm okay with that because you get like 30 years out of them. So those are all the things that I would suggest. Thanks for letting me vent that out. All right. What are your thoughts on buying and holding condos? I think I answered that. I'm okay with it. Garner NC, I send people to your channel daily. Thank you, Jackson. I plan on getting a HELOC for down payments. What are your thoughts? Awesome. I definitely recommend doing that. I think it's the way to go. The only thing I would keep in mind is that lines of credits are short-term financing. So whatever you put on a line of credit, just make sure that you have the ability to pay it off within like 12 or 18 months. So I would just be aggressively paying it off if you're using it for down payments. But other than that, man, I think it's a great idea. You're going to have a tough time. You're going to have a really tough time. You can, for sure. But you're going to have to get super creative. So banks aren't going to like talking to you. And since real estate is so capital intensive, I would really just make sure that you're not setting yourself up for failure. If you don't have reserves or like a lot of savings, if you don't have any income, I mean, kind of like Stay Focused Media just said, I think it was T310. He's really starting to find out that real estate is a long-term game for sure. I mean, let's say like best case scenario, if you don't have a job and you buy it, you get into real estate investing. And if we're talking about buy and hold real estate investing, then I think like a real home run deal is like $300 to $400 a month in cash flow. What you gonna do with $300 to $400 a month with no job? I mean, that doesn't pay your monthly expenses, I presume. So you would have to get multiple of those home run deals and buy and hold side. I think you can wholesale without a job. I mean, there's a lot of ways you can make real estate investing your job by being like contributing to buy and hold investors via being a person that flips or a person that does wholesaling. But as far as getting rental properties without a job, that's a tough road. I know a lot of people that have done it, but they had to be super creative, take on a lot of risk, and struggle every step of the way for like the first 10 years. Nope. No, I have not. I tried to, but honestly, auction.com really confuses me. I have a really tough time logging into that place and seeing things. And then so often there have been a few properties on auction.com where I was really interested in them, but when I went to buy them on the date that it said it went for auction, it was like removed because it sold otherwise. I don't know where auction.com gets their leads from or whatnot, but I don't know. What red flags do you look out for when looking for a property? So, I mean, I think that's the cool thing about real estate investing that I've said a few times. So more power to all the people that have been on here since it started. I would say the red flags are the things that cost the most amount of money to fix. There was one property that a guy tried to give away to me for free, and it was missing a basement wall, and I wasn't comfortable in trying to fix that. Other than that, I would say red flags, if it costs so much money to get it up to speed that it makes it a bad deal, I would say that's what a red flag is for me. Otherwise, I mean, let's say it's missing a basement wall was extreme. I wouldn't even take that property for free. But let's say he wanted to sell it for $5,000, but was willing to fix the basement wall. Well, it's not really a red flag anymore. Now it looks a lot more like opportunity. So I would just kind of view it that way. Is how can I make this red flag that I'm seeing opportunity? And you don't always have an answer for that, which is why I passed on that one property. I lived in a condo and my HOA put a limit on the number of rentals in the community. Yes. I have seen this a lot and I've heard about this, and that's one of my biggest hesitations is there have been several condos that I almost purchased, but then in talking to the HOA, rentals weren't allowed. So I haven't really dealt with any of them just because at the end of the day, I don't really have much control over it. And one of the reasons that real estate investing is like favored over the stock market is just because the sheer amount of control that you have. Man, that's a great question. And it's still more nuanced than that. So if you have enough money to put down on that, I mean, that doesn't make it bad, but at the end of the day, does that leave you without any reserves? And I guess that would just be best answered through like an inspection of the property to figure out what kind of deferred maintenance is there. Let's see. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good idea. If you house hack in the area that's more expensive, getting creative on offerings, your offerings of where people can live is a really good idea. And I have put this off a lot. I want this broadcast to continue, but let me tell you, I got to go to the restroom. I don't know the protocol for these things, but I'm going to do that. My attention span is getting so tiny because I'm distracting myself. I'm going to be right back. If you leave, I'm sorry, but I'll do it as quick as possible. That's funny. So when I left, it was 25. Now it's 23. I think we did okay. There are a few guys that I watch that I really look up to, like Nick Nimmin. He does like 4 or 5 hour live streams, 4 or 5 hours. I need to figure out what he does when that happens. And I see some other people drinking coffee and water and whatnot. I need to do some research on this. Mr. Parker, what you said here is a great idea. My attention span is back now. Let's go back to this one because I was really starting to struggle on keeping things up. Real estate investing is always super capital intensive. You're never going to have enough money to be super comfortable because the more money you have, the more properties you can afford, the more properties you can afford, the more your exposure is. So we have like 80 properties now. If something catastrophic happened, insurance didn't cover it, we had to replace all those roofs, we'd go belly up. I don't think you could possibly have enough enough reserves to handle like the worst possible scenarios in real estate investing. It's all risk, calculated risk, but the way that this question is posed, I mean, there's definitely validity to it. The higher class areas generally have lower returns. Some people say that they're more reliable, they're more safe. The people that would live there are a little bit more, they treat the properties more respectably, but I don't think there's much validity to that. I've seen, from my law enforcement days, I've seen, $1 million homes just absolutely trashed on the inside. So it really comes down to screening. But I think real estate investing rather than not real estate investing is definitely the right way to go about doing things. Man, that's a phenomenal question. Yes, I will do that. I got a book sent to me by one of my favorite out-of-state investor insurance clients. It's called Rise Up for dads who want to lead boldly. I'm really looking forward to reading this book. I don't know anything about it or why he sent it to me. I'm waiting to talk to him today, but yeah, I'll when I talk to him to thank him for this book and this phenomenal gift, I'll also ask him to let me interview him on this channel. I think it's a phenomenal idea. Thank you, man. I've heard that in some cultures, there's no word for retirement. You have to have a reason or purpose for waking up each day. When you don't, then you're usually dead. Oh, I like that a lot. I completely agree. What's the point of hurrying up to wait? What would you do if you only had $30,000 to invest? I would rejoice at the fact that I had $30,000 to invest. Oh, man. America. See, Rishi, this is what I was talking about. America's the best place to live, man. We are. Okay, so this is a phenomenal question, but at the same time, I think you have to make like $36,000 a year to be in the top 1% of all income earners on a global basis. So if you have $30,000 to invest, you're doing really well for yourself. That's a lot of money. That's like someone's entire salary for like 1 year, and you have the privilege of investing it. If I had $30,000 to invest, let's assume that I also have a job. I would use the $30,000 as down payments on properties. Probably, I really agree with what I'm doing here. Surprisingly, even though I'm a little bit biased, I like what I'm doing here. So I would use the $30,000 to probably buy 2 or 3 properties that are in the $50,000 range or $30,000 range. I don't know the exact math on the down payments of that, and probably keep about 10 to 15,000 for reserves. That's what I would do. But I will say, because of the way that I started in real estate investing, the way that I'm going to answer this question the majority of the time is if you have a strong W-2, then I would use lump sums of money like this as down payments, because if you have a strong W-2, you're very bankable. When I got into real estate investing, I've never been very bankable. I'm a business owner, just because of the way everything is written. Banks just don't look at my situation to be very favorable. So I always have a little bit of envy for the people that have strong W-2 jobs. They can just walk in and get loans. So I've got one good friend of mine who him and his wife collectively make around 250 grand a year, I think. And they qualify for everything. So I think, more power to them. They're saving like $5,000 a month between the two of them. And they're setting themselves up for success so much because they play the game well. I never had a high W-2 income job when I left law enforcement. I was making like 44 grand a year. So I'm always going to be a little bit envious of people that can build real estate portfolios that way. And whenever people reach out to me and ask that question, I definitely think the safest of all possible ways to invest in real estate is with a strong W-2 job and slowly. Yes, I would spend $10,000 on a house almost any of the time. If the only thing that this house needed was a roof, I would buy that over and over and over again. I would say the Project Firehouse that we're doing, we bought that one for $10,000, so I can immediately just relate this question that you're asking to that house, and that house needed about $30,000 to $40,000 worth of work. If you've been watching those videos, I'm going to try to keep it as close to 30 as possible. But yeah, I definitely think the majority of the time, if you can buy a house for $10,000 and it needs a little bit of work, I would say over the next 30, 40 years, that's a good investment and you're going to be okay. So how do you figure out the after repair value of a property? This is a great question. And I think it really comes down to knowing your market and looking at a lot of comps. So Zillow, Realtor.com, Redfin, these are, and Trulia. So Zillow is the one that I'm most familiar with. And generally, you can look at the map and you could see all of the lot lines or like the grid lines of the neighborhood. And they generally have like little circles in the middle. If it's off market, they'll be gray. If it's on the market, I don't know what color it is. It doesn't really matter, but you can see like what Zillow thinks the property is worth. And then you could find ones in the same area that you're looking to invest in. And you can see like what they're selling for and what type of condition they're in. So it's all subjective. So there's no like after repair value that's either right or wrong. It really just comes down to your opinion of the property and what someone else is willing to pay for it, or what an appraiser is willing to come out and say that it's worth. But the market constantly fluctuates, and I would just have a good understanding, try to look at it from an unbiased perspective of what type of condition is your property in compared to the others that have recently sold in that area. If it's better than all of theirs, which all property owners tend to say about their own properties is they're better off than the others, then you might be able to sell it for a little bit more. If it is worse, if there is roof work that needs to be done, or if the bathroom and kitchen are super outdated, then you might have to sell it for a little bit less than the properties in that same area that are recently remodeled or selling for. Hello, JJ. This is the second time you've said hello to me, and this is the second time I'm saying hello to you. Thanks for understanding. I appreciate it. We all stayed. Okay, -2. That's awesome. You're not seeing my question. I'm not seeing your question. Where is it? Let me scroll through. I've said hello to you twice, and I meant it each time. I don't know, JJ, can you re-ask it? M. Horton Diaz, I saw you on a comment recently where you said that you would be here, and I've been waiting to hear from you this entire time. So thank you for finally showing up. Since you know NC, do you think the area in or around Charlotte is overinflated to start investing there now? Yes, but I'm super biased and I can no longer answer this question realistically or reasonably, because I live in a market now that's Dayton, Ohio, where we can buy properties for $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 all day long. My parents still live around Charlotte. That's where I grew up, in Kannapolis, and my brother and I actually met there last Thanksgiving, I think, and drove around downtown Kannapolis, because when we grew up, it was just a little mill town. And now they put the Intimidator Stadium down there. They are building up tons of things, and they're knocking out some of these old mill houses and putting like $200,000 homes. They're like tall, skinny, little cigarette box type houses in that area for like 200 grand. I wouldn't pay 200 grand for a house like that. But I don't know. If you're a West Coaster, then what are you doing looking at North Carolina, Charlotte to invest in? Thanks for being here this whole time, and thanks for getting up at 5. I tell you what, nothing would make me happier than, that's not true, I lied. I would do this later if I had the ability to, but I really want to spend a lot more time with you guys and answering all these questions, because I think it's super important. But 4:30 is when I call it a day, and I get to go hang out with my lovely wife and 3 beautiful kiddos. So thank you for sacrificing for the sake of knowledge and thinking that I have enough knowledge to kind of pass on to you for waking up at 5. But thanks for being on the West Coast. What part of Charlotte do you think you are getting into? And I would say that, again, I'm not a fan of sitting on the sidelines. I think since you don't live in Charlotte, I think there are definitely better areas to invest in. But at the end of the day, I'm not so sure what your plans are. I'm not so sure what you're trying to do. So it might be worthwhile. It really depends on how it fits into that like overarching why that I've mentioned a few times. Gastonia. I don't know much about Gastonia other than what I've heard about it. When I was growing up, I never spent much time there. But when I lived there, I definitely think that was the cheapest of all areas to invest in around that area. But again, cheap doesn't always mean bad. And I mean, I think if it was part of your plan to buy a lot of Gastonia and try to bring it up slowly to the other suburbs of Charlotte, I think that would be a good move. But again, community improvement is something that I'm a very big proponent of. Cabo San Lucas. There's a lot of country songs written about you. There was a guy you mentioned whose live chats lasts 4 or 5 hours. What's his name? His name is Nick Nimmin. Nimmin. I've watched him a lot to learn about YouTube because I used to think that YouTube was just about pressing record on a camera and talking about things. And I have quickly learned that that is not the case. So while I am overwhelmingly thankful for all of the opportunities that YouTube has opened up for me, for all of the people that it has allowed me to meet, I definitely underestimated how much work it was, how much thought had to go into it, and how important it is to brand yourself and really get the search engine optimization side of this up and running. So Nick Nimmin, that's pretty much all he talks about, is how to help people build YouTube channels. Nick Nimmin. What's up with the 45406 area? Ooh, you have done some research very quickly. So I'm going to answer this one real quick. I'm going to do this every Friday at 8 a.m. So if this keeps going as well as this one does, and if truly, 20 people are staying on this for so long, then I might try to incorporate this a lot more often, because when I'm making these videos, I definitely have people in mind, and I am biased in that I think the information that I'm putting out is really good. But at the same time, nothing beats getting on here with you guys and actually answering your questions. I wish there were a way where I could have you guys up here on video with me, whoever wanted to be a part of that, and make it a little bit more of a two-way street rather than me just responding to stuff in the chat box. But at the same time, this is still a lot better off getting, in my opinion, getting immediate and direct feedback towards the individual hurdle or question that you have, rather than just crossing my fingers hoping that I make a good video for you all that is actually helpful to a multitude of people, rather than the 1 or 2 individuals I'm actually trying to help. 45406, I like that area. Dayton is putting a lot of money into that area at the moment. They have the Salem Peace Corridor, I think is what it's called. They are building a library right now, right on Salem. That's starting to look pretty good. Salem Avenue, I think, is the main thoroughfare inside of 45406. Back in the day when Dayton was really thriving, this was one of the more ritzy areas. You could just kind of tell by the architecture and the way that those homes are built. They are built like tanks, especially the brick ones over there. They're like block and brick, and they're massive, like 2,000, 3,000 square foot homes. And you could buy them now for 40, 50, 60 grand. Some of them are starting to sell for the 80s and 90s, but 45406 is an area that my wife and I thought about moving to when we first moved up here, because just the size of the home that you could buy. But ultimately we decided against it for no real reason other than like the other cars in the area. I hope that makes sense. Thank you for your time, Shar. This has been tons of fun. Aha, I really appreciate you. I think this is awesome too. Set up a Zoom. That only works a little bit. And then I would have to figure out how to, I mean, can you just live stream Zoom calls? And then who would be on the Zoom calls? It would be like I don't know. That's something I'll look into. If your time will allow. My time allows for a lot. I've got a really nice boss. He's very flexible. Oh, thank you. I appreciate you all immensely. Man, I'm getting tons of thank yous. I hope. Are there any more questions? Who's got some questions? Or do I need to go back up in here a little bit more and think about some deeper things to talk about? The next thing I have to do today is at noon. So I have to leave around 11:30. If you guys want to keep on talking, I am down to answer questions. They just got to come in. Let's see here. Look at that. I got rid of my name and I put that there. That's a thing. I made this thing though. It doesn't actually have to say YouTube because I'm only streaming this on YouTube. Last time I also did it on Facebook, but now I am not. Yeah, look at that. Here we go. I don't know the answer to that. I think a lot of my deals are for less than 30,000, but that was also, the market has turned a lot here lately. And I would say for sure, all of the properties that we buy are under 50,000, but under 30,000 might be a little bit of a stretch. If we buy properties that need work, then it's definitely less than 30,000. If we buy properties and they are ready for someone to move in, even if they're a little bit dated, then we generally spend around 40 to 45. And I get that I'm only talking about like a $20,000 spread, but $20,000 can make a huge difference. Also, the cash part. So when I say I buy properties for cash, it's not my cash. It's generally private investors' cash. But I'm just using that as like a not bank financing kind of way, because bank financing takes like 60 to 90 days. And a lot of times when I put in offers on properties, I say, cash, 2-week close. I still have to go find that money, or I've already found that money from a private investor. But it's not like I'm wiring the money myself. Looking into private lending, where's a list of legal resources, online documents? Let me check. There's this one lady who is incredible at this kind of stuff. She puts on webinars and seminars all of the time. Let's see. Her name starts with a J. I've got her information, and I really don't want to mess this up because she's super helpful. She's like the go-to lawyer for like syndications and whatnot. I think she's even done some work for Grant Cardone. Regardless of how you feel about him, he has done a lot of syndication. Her name starts with a J. Man. I think this is what getting old feels like. I'm going to find it. Jillian Sidoti. Sidoti is her last name. I think that is probably the go-to legal person for raising private money for real estate investing. My brother and I have spoke to her a few times about forming, I think they were called Regulation A, B, or C funds and the differences between those. We've had a few conference calls with her. She definitely knows her stuff. I think for the quality of service that she provides, her rates are extraordinarily reasonable. So that's definitely the person that I would go to and look at. And I mean, again, she's got stuff on YouTube. She does a lot of webinars and whatnot, and she regularly makes herself available to answer people's questions on raising private capital. I don't think it makes sense to create funds for the majority of people, but I think she's the only legal resource that comes to mind as far as that. As far as like raising private money goes, Matt Faircloth wrote a book. He's one of the Bigger Pockets people. He's got a YouTube channel. I think it's called the DeRosa Group, DeRosa Group. I think that's his YouTube channel. He talks a bunch about raising private capital from friends and family. Equity Trust is the name of a actual custodian company, and they are the ones that allow people to kind of roll over their 401ks, their IRAs from previous jobs and put them into self-directed funds that could then be lent to other people for real estate. So you can do unsecured or secured. I would highly recommend secured. Always make sure that the money that you get is secured by property, just because I think that's safest. But again, I've got my disclaimer down here. I really don't know what I'm talking about, but they do. Equity Trust, I'm a huge fan of them. Equity Trust and Quest Trust are two of the custodian people that they put on webinars and seminars as well. And I think if you are serious about raising private capital, then understanding how and becoming the person that your friends and family can go to figure out what to do with their 401ks or retirement funds from their previous employers. So a lot of our private investors are investing with us from money in retirement accounts from previous jobs. That was a very serious sentence that was filled with a ton of time lapse things. I hope that made sense. Another private lending question. This is good. What's the best way to get capital? I have no family. That sounds sad, the way that that's typed. I'm probably reading into it, but I have no family. I would say another thing, in addition to getting mentors, one of the things that I do really well, which is evident by the existence of this YouTube channel, is I love real estate a ton and I never shut up about it. So I don't think in the past 3 or 4 years, I have been involved in any conversation that didn't at some point turn around to real estate investing. And I think because of that, since I'm constantly forming friendships with people, and I mention real estate investing, and I mention that I borrow money regularly from friends and family at 10 and 12%, then that really catches on. I mentioned this book last time too, but How to Win Friends and Influence People. This is not like if I didn't know anything about anything and I heard this title, I'd be like, stop trying to manipulate people, you mean person. But that's not what this book is about at all. And it says the only book you need to lead you to success. And I kind of agree with that, except for now also The Wealthy Gardener. You should read that book. Truly the best book I've ever read. So have a lot of conversations with friends and family, or in this case, just friends, about real estate investing. And as you educate yourself, you kind of start teaching others, whether you want to or not, just because it's top of mind for you. One of the quotes that I had on the whiteboard at my house for the longest of times is, I think it was Emerson. It was either Emerson or Thoreau, and it's a man is what he thinks about all day. And, you know, you are what you think about all day. So if you start thinking about real estate investing all day, then eventually you're going to start educating everybody that you talk to on real estate investing. And at some point, one of those people is just like, you know what? I would love to get into real estate investing, but I don't have the time to learn all of the stuff because you have been learning about these things for a long time. So how about you just take my money and invest it in real estate investing? If you keep at it, that's going to happen to you eventually. But you also have to like prove yourself and then have like a good track record just for the peace of mind for the other person. And then once you get the capital, you definitely don't want to lose it or mess it up. No pressure though, no pressure. What's the one major reason that made you choose real estate to build your wealth rather than other ventures? This is a really awesome question. And I'm going to answer this with a long story. When I was in law enforcement, so my plan, so I got into law enforcement right when I was 21 or 21. And I got a hold of a book that really helped me think through what to do with my life when I started getting a big boy paycheck. And that's The Automatic Millionaire by David Bach. And the main takeaway from this book that I had was the only way to regularly save your money is to take the decision out of your hands. So I had the automatic savings thing set up. So each time I got a paycheck, a percentage of it automatically went to my 401k. Ultimately, I cashed out my 401k, but that is part of the story that I want to tell you. So I had it in my head. I read tons of books about investing in stocks and all of that. And I had it all worked out in my head to where I was going to invest in dividend stocks, and I was going to get around $400,000 of dividend stocks saved up in my 401k and IRA and whatnot. And when that happened, I was going to be able to replace my entry-level law enforcement salary. When I was hired on at $33,000, I think. So there are dividend stocks that you can invest in that pay you like 10% per quarter or something like that, or 10% per year, but they paid out quarterly. Well, one night I got a call from a house in the area I was assigned to where someone was trying to break into this guy's car. So I get there, the homeowner had like already scared away the dude that was shaking his door handle of his vehicle. And then he brought me inside of his house to show me his security camera footage of the individual that was trying to get into his house or his car. And that man had a very nice house. He had very nice cars. And when we got to talking, he was a local business owner. He owned a painting company, and he was extraordinarily nice. So at the time, I was super inquisitive. I was obviously thinking a lot about investing and building up the best version of myself, family, all of the things. And he had all of like the outward material things that made me think he was a successful individual. So I started asking him questions about, money, investments, and all of that. And he had a very small amount of money in the stock market. Now, to him, a small amount, he didn't tell me this at the time, but he has over $1 million like in the stock market, but the majority of his wealth was in real estate. And I talked to him for quite some time. I definitely took advantage of meeting him, and I actually like exchanged numbers with him because I wanted to ask him more questions later, and he was nice enough to agree to that. And he ended up taking me around to all of the properties that he owned. He owned some residential stuff, he owned some commercial buildings, and he was nice enough to be just very transparent with me. He told me how much he purchased the property for. He told me how much they were rented out for. He told me how much work he had to do in it. And I was just blown away and honestly a little bit angry, because if what he was saying was true, then his strategy most certainly beat out my little plan of dividend investing and getting wealthy really slowly over the next 30 years. So when I started and I was like 21 or whatever, 21, 22, my goal was to have like $1.2, $1.3 million around my retiring age, like over the next 30, 40 years. And this guy did it a lot quicker. So shortly after that is when I decided to leave law enforcement. So I stayed in touch with him. He introduced me to a few of his friends. and they were all in real estate investing, and they were all like very favorable and nice in teaching me what they had learned about real estate investing. Now, this was all in the North Carolina, the Durham market. So then I decided to move up here to Ohio. And whenever I was doing that, that's when I started really researching real estate investing and really looking for all the ways to make money. And honestly, when I first started, I was looking at researching real estate investing as a way to debunk real estate investing and prove that it wasn't as effective as my dividend strategy. So I had a little bit of pride wrapped up in my dividend plan. And ultimately, you see where we are now. We've got like 83 properties since the time that I'm talking to you about like driving up here. So I did not get into real estate investing. Well, I guess I did only get into real estate investing to build wealth because I saw that it was better than my dividend stock plan. It's a good story, though, and he's still a phenomenal friend of mine, and he's still a really good business owner. So that's why I got into real estate investing. You got to start working. More power to you. Thanks for getting up and hanging out with me. What cap rate are you comfortable with and or require to consider an investment property? Phenomenal question. Residential real estate, like 1 to 4 family. Sometimes people throw cap rates on there just because they probably have roots in the commercial real estate investing space. If you're not familiar, cap rate is how much money it makes on an annual basis compared to what the purchase price is. However, residential real estate, 1 to 4 family, the value is determined based on comparables, not the cap rate. So when it comes to returns, for me, the only percentage that I'm really familiar with or that I really go off of is the 2% rule. And the 2% is 2% of the purchase price. So if I buy a house for $40,000, I want to rent it out for at least $800. So that's 2% of $40,000. Now, the only reason that I came up with this, or that I tried to stick to this, is whenever I started getting into real estate investing, I was really focused on making sure that, so when I first started analyzing one property per day, I got all the expenses that is associated with the property and like the capital expenditures and the repairs, maintenance, all of that included. If you could rent it out for 2%, then generally all of those expenses would be covered and then some. So that was like the first pattern that I realized when I went through the painstaking process of analyzing a property and listing out all the potential expenses and the reserves. So that's why I kind of stick to that. So I'm happy if a property meets the 2% rule. Long-winded way to answer that question. Thanks, man. I really appreciate it. I'm really pumped. I was actually telling my wife how excited I was this morning because of this live stream. I'm really looking. I know this is only the second one, but I'm really looking forward to doing this every week, and really excited to see like what it turns into. What motivates a private investor to invest with a person? So all the investors that I have spoken with, they are a fan of real estate investing and a fan of investing it with an individual because of the security and the predictable returns. So again, the stock market has its place. I'm not speaking against the stock market, but the stock market is always kind of a mixed bag. You never know what you're going to get. People on the television are always talking about and always speculating about where the market's going to go. And if one thing that has nothing to do with the company or economics at all happens, then your stocks stand to lose a lot of money. Well, with real estate, that's not the case. It's more so removed from the emotions of investing, and it is largely based on where the property is, how big the property is, and how much somebody's willing to live there. So like for our first position mortgage investors, we're saying for the next 3 years, we'll give you 12%. And if we fail to do that, you get this property, which is actually worth more than the money that you're giving me. So it's super secure. That's a lot more secure than if someone sneezes in China and the stock market goes down a few hundred points. I'm being facetious and funny. I don't think Chinese sneezes affect the stock market. Thank you, 3D of Tom. What amount of cash flow do you look for in a deal to make it work, considering you use private money to buy it? So I analyze a property twice. The first time has to do with the private money. So if I can borrow money at 10 or 12% and it still has positive cash flow at the end, even if it's just like $50, $100, then I'm okay with that because it's not in the red. And of course, this includes all of the expenses of the property. So the interest payment plus all of the expenses, if the rental income is still greater than that, I'm generally happy. Then, since we are doing 2 to 5 year notes or 1 to 10 year notes, as I mentioned earlier, then at that point, we really look at how quickly can we refinance out of it. And since we are acquiring properties a lot quicker, as I've also mentioned, and Ariane, as you know, the 36 properties that we're refinancing right now, some of the properties that are included in that are properties that we've recently acquired, like even this year. So even though we signed like a 1 to 10 year note, there's like a 1 year prepayment penalty that we put in there. It's not like the investor said, if you pay this off early, we want more money. We put it in there so that if we do pay it off within 3 months, rather than the 1 to 10 years that we agreed to, then it's not a waste of their time. They still got a decent return. And generally that's about 3% of the purchase price is our self-imposed prepayment penalty. And after that, so after we refinance it, we also analyze it again to make sure that the cash flow increases after we refinance from the 8 to 12% private money loan to the traditional bank loan that's like 4.5 to 6%. So long as it cash flows on both of those analysis, then we're generally happy with it. And we understand that the margins are tight when we have private money on it, but it's a means to an end. And all we have to do is float that property until we refinance it. And that's when we experience like a windfall of cash flow. So I'm going to do a video about the refinance that we're doing, and I'm going to have my brother on it because he eats, sleeps, and breathes these numbers, and he knows them very well. But this refinance is going to lower our monthly payment by like $2,500. It's like I think it's going to be somewhere between $1.6 and $1.8 million loan, depending on how the appraisals come back. And the principal payment that we're going to be paying down is somewhere around like $5,000 a month. So it's really exciting. And the private money it feels really good to be able to provide those type of returns to friends and families that like believe in us, trust us, and whatnot. So it's all really surreal how this is coming together, but it's definitely a process. Hey, Luke and Jenny. Trying to smile as big as your profile picture. See, I'd like to lend. Whoa, whoa, whoa. We're gonna have to continue this conversation and become friends before that. The SEC is serious about their regulations, which if you're interested in private lending, if you are interested in borrowing money from people or giving money to people, you definitely want to make sure that you are familiar with all the rules and regulations that go along with the SEC. The SEC, they're serious. But hey, 3D of Tom, I'm happy we've met. Subject to deals. I am a fan of them in the sense that they are a phenomenal means to buy properties and help people that are in need of being helped. So to those not familiar, subject to is when you buy a property subject to the mortgage, but you're not allowed to use the definition, the term inside the definition. So if somebody finds themselves in a predicament where they are no longer able to pay their mortgage on a monthly basis, they can sell the property to someone else and keep that mortgage that they're no longer able to pay in place. So they could sell their property, and the person that buys it, it's like a quit claim deed. It's not like an official title company closing thing. You can still do a title search, and you probably should do a title search, but the mortgage isn't removed. The investor or the person that buys the property continues to pay the mortgage that's on that property. Now, the majority of mortgages, I don't know much about subject to deals. Let me say that. I think my disclaimer is still up, but most mortgages have a due on sale clause, which means if this were to take place, then they have the ability to call the note immediately, which means you have to pay it in full. And then sometimes mortgage companies are also, I've never done it, but I know that you can also assume the mortgage, which means the mortgage company might be kind enough to take out the previous person's name and put your name or the person that bought the property's name on the mortgage instead. Again, that's kind of like a refinance, not necessarily just assuming the mortgage, but there's a lot of nuances and a lot of what ifs that go into this entire situation that we're speaking of. So generally, subject to deals happen when someone finds himself in a bad circumstance, isn't necessarily the most educated on the circumstance that they're in or ways to get out of it. Because from my experience and from what I've seen, if a person has the ability to sell the property subject to, they have generally, it's probably also an option for them to just sell the property on the MLS using a realtor as normal. Now, a lot of people that hold these classes and whatnot on how to do subject to deals will teach you ways that you can kind of convince the person to sell you a property on a subject to deal. My only challenge to this, because again, the main thing that I'm really after is making sure that it's a win-win situation and kind of building up the community. So long as you're truly doing this person a favor and it's a win-win, then I'm okay with it. And I think it's a great opportunity. But if you are somehow taking advantage of a person, then I am totally against that. Purchase price or how much you have in? If you're still on, I would love to have you re-ask that question because I'm afraid too much time has passed and I no longer know what this question is in reference to. That's a great question. So Ohio has a lot of history. Ohio was one of the, it was booming back in the day. I think industry, manufacturing. We have a large automotive footprint, or did. It's probably similar to Detroit. I think people are more familiar with what happened in Detroit than they are with the entire state of Ohio. Cincinnati, Columbus, I think those have come back a lot more quickly than Dayton. They're a lot larger than Dayton as well. But I mean, comparing Ohio to Washington probably isn't a good idea for many reasons. But local real estate markets are super localized. And Ohio is no less livable than Washington. In many ways, it's probably more livable because the cost of living is a lot nicer to people that aren't as well off. And I think when you look at places that are really expensive to live, there's generally a reason for that. And I think Washington, like I think if Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos were to move to Ohio, I think the market would go up a lot along with that. So places like California, Washington, you kind of have to ask, in my opinion, you have to more so ask yourself, what is there to cause it to be so expensive, rather than why is Ohio so cheap? Absolutely, and you do them a real service when you give them returns. Thanks for the prepayment penalty tip. For sure, man. Thinking of doing subject to on property where owner is in Chapter 13 bankruptcy would be to make them whole, get them out of bankruptcy, and acquire their second home at fair price. Win-win. Awesome. Now, I think there's a lot of reasons why subject to deals would be beneficial. I would just, like all things in life, I've seen it go both ways. Some people are good intentioned and others are not. So long as you are on the side of good intentions, I'm a huge fan of what you're doing to service other people. I have $50K to invest, but I don't like to borrow money. My plan is to start out flipping for the next few years until I have enough saved to buy enough rentals to live on. What's your thoughts on that? Totally. Totally. Your question is big, so it covers up my beard. So I'm gonna hide it. I think there are, for as many different opinions and preferences as there are an equal number of ways to become financially independent and to become wealthy. So if you don't like to borrow money, that's cool. You seem like you are already aware that you're going to have to flip a lot of properties or somehow raise enough capital or make enough money, not raise capital, but make enough money in order to buy enough rentals outright to pay for your monthly living expenses. But it seems like you've got a really good head on your shoulder, and you know that you are already living like frugally enough to where it will probably be fewer properties than more. So I definitely think it's the way to go. But there's this constant like risk and reward that you have to kind of go off of. For me, I do not find borrowing money to be risky. I think it's more risky to not borrow money. But again, preferences, personal preferences. I think if I can see it both ways. Again, my roots and the beginning of my financial education was very influenced by Dave Ramsey. So I totally understand that mindset. And by and large, I'm with it. But it really comes down to your overarching why, what your interest in real estate is, why you're doing this, and all of that. So seems like you've got a plan, and I definitely believe in your ability to execute it. 3D of Tom, are private lending rates lower in more competitive areas, or is there kind of a standard across the country? Private lending rates. I'm not so sure private lending rates is a real thing because it's private. I would say private lending rates are whatever the two parties agree on. Since they're like friends and family and it's not a regulated thing, you definitely can't violate any usury laws by any means. But at the same time, if you are two consenting individuals that are lending money to each other, then I definitely think you can kind of come to any agreement. We offer 10 and 12%, but at the same time, we have friends in the same market, and he pays his investors like 4 and 6%. And it's just because he's got a different approach to things. So I would say it's really flexible, and I don't think that the rates have anything to do with the competitive markets. I would say if real estate prices are higher in Ohio, or if they were to become higher and the rents wouldn't go down, it would be a lot more difficult for us to pay 12%. So if we got into a predicament where we had to pay $100,000 for these same homes that we're currently paying $30,000 and $40,000 for, then 12% is 1% per month. So $1,000 a month is a lot higher than $300 or $400 per month, and that would make it to where we wouldn't be able to offer 12%. So I guess it does have a good amount to do with it, but at the same time, depending on the circumstance, it wouldn't be totally out of the picture or silly to borrow money at a rate where it doesn't cash flow for a little bit until you can refinance it into something that does, which is why I'm a huge fan of private lending, where the banks aren't involved, and you really have the ability just to collectively come together as like a win-win situation. Dude, thank you, M. Morton Diaz, and thanks for holding strong since 5 a.m. 5 a.m. to 10:44. That's 2 time zones wrong. From 8 to 10:44. That's awesome. Thanks, man. Thank you, guys. And I think, yeah, off to work. I think I have to do that too. I think I've finally gotten to the point where if I delay myself from leaving any further, then I might be late to my 12 o'clock because I have to print off some things, and I do not have a printer in my office. I'm one of these millennial rascals that protest printers because most things can be done electronically, right? But I will give it another minute or two to see if there's any questions that come in right before I have to go, because I would hate for you to have been on this live stream for so long waiting to ask your question and then I abruptly leave. That would be so rude. And I see 17 of you are still on. And we're 15 minutes away from 3 hours. So how about we just make it a round number? How about you guys ask some questions and I'll spend the next 15 minutes answering them. That makes sense. Next Friday. All right. I appreciate it, Ariane. Yes, I think so. Tax lien sales, somebody didn't pay their taxes and then somebody purchased them. We didn't. So in Ohio, there's only like 2 or 3 companies that have the ability to purchase tax lien sales, and then it's their responsibility to sell it to the rest of the public. I don't know why Ohio did that. I don't know why that's their solution, but I definitely think that you have a good chance of getting a well-valued property for a tax lien sale, because the only thing that the county really wants is to collect their tax money. So it's not often that like a $100,000 home would be foreclosed on for like, 6 or 10 grand of taxes. And then whoever's lucky enough to get that property for 6 or 10 grand would then sell it for, still more. If there's nothing wrong with the property, then probably closer to the full amount. But there's a lot of room for error there. Here in Ohio, there are still opportunities to get great deals on tax lien sales, but by and large, because the manner to get them is so controlled, I haven't seen too many phenomenal deals come from tax liens. Man, and we still have 13 minutes. I don't think I know enough to talk about tax liens for the next 13 minutes. I technically have 4 properties that are sort of from tax lien sales, but the city of Dayton was doing this program called Lot Links, which they've stopped. But in a nutshell, if properties were behind on their taxes for at least 2 years, if they have been vacant for 2 years and the utilities have been off for 2 years, you could put a down payment with the city. They would do a board of revisions foreclose on the property. They would waive the back taxes owed, waive any liens or wipe away any liens on the property, and then deed over the person that put the down payment a free and clear property. And you would just have to reimburse them for the rest of the foreclosure fees, which were sometimes they were never to exceed $2,500. So I have 4 properties that way, but those are also the ones that we had to do the most amount of rehab on. Yes, I will send you some information right after we get out of that. I'm putting together a mastermind group. I'm not necessarily a fan of buying courses and whatnot, but I have benefited greatly personally from being part of a mastermind. So I'm starting a group for 10 people. It's $300 a month. And the whole original goal of that was, it's part of my 3-year goals and my 3-year plan to help 10 people buy 10 properties. But when I was first pitching this idea of a mastermind to a lot of people that I respect, it's not necessarily right for me to put my goals on other people. So if you want 10 properties, then I would like to help you get there. But if you only want 3, depending on the market you're in, I'd like to help you get there too over the next 3 years. If you want more than 10 properties, I'd like to help you get there too. But just saying 10 people help getting 10 properties, that may have been a little bit too specific. So that's the thing that I'm working through at the moment, Phoenix, Arizona. But nonetheless, it's still a real thing. And I owe you an email on getting that. Most of our loans are interest only. We just recently started doing a few private loans that are amortized, and we are amortizing them over like 8-9 years. And I think that's really cool. They cash flow a very small amount, if at all, but we're also paying them down super aggressively. So if it's amortized over 8 years, then for every 1 year on that 8-year amortization, you're paying off like 3.5 years on the other, on like a traditional 20, 25, 30-year loan. So I think that's pretty cool. Yeah, I would love to talk about the mastermind some more. I'm really excited about it. Buying foreclosure properties comes down to you knowing your market, your courthouse, and your courthouse's foreclosure process. So I would definitely look into sheriff sales. If you just like Google, if you live in ABC County, I would Google ABC County sheriff sale and see where that takes you. And hopefully you could pull up a list of all the foreclosures that are in the process of being foreclosed on. And then you could do your due diligence on figuring out which ones are worthwhile. Man, Simo, I'm impressed that you're still on here too, man. You guys have supported me a ton. I sure do appreciate it. This is 3 hours of just hanging out. This is super cool. I can't talk about interest-only loans at the moment. Interest-only loans. So the majority of the loans that we're refinancing out of the moment, the 36 that we just did the appraisals for, we're going from 10 and 12% to a 4.5% bank loan, but we're only taking like $2,500 off of our monthly payment because our 10 and 12% loans are interest only. And when we're going to 4.5%, since we're adding the amortization in and the principal payments, then it's not as radical of a savings as you would expect going from 10 to 12% to 4.5. You're cutting it in half, but you're not cutting the payment in half because you're adding the amortization in, which is, you know, like I mentioned earlier, we're going to start paying off like $4-5 grand a month in principal, which is super exciting. Super exciting. So I think it's time for this to come to an end. I'm going to cut it off just 8 minutes early from the 3-hour mark that I just arbitrarily set for myself moments ago. And the printer has a lot to do with it. I'd like to get to my house to print off these documents that I then have to go get signed before my kids go down for their nap. So I appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing all of you next week, Friday at 8 a.m. for another live stream. So thanks so much. If you have any questions, I'm going to just comment on the videos between now and then. And other than that, I really look forward to talking to you guys soon. Thanks.